on the virtual platform, Member van Wyk in the house, and myself. So we are quorate, and we are then in a position to proceed. Thanks, Member Masipa. I've already mentioned that, and thank you so much. I know there's traffic. Member Stoffel's also just been in traffic, and she's just arrived. So welcome to you, Member Stoffel. We're just starting, so perfect timing. Online, I think we also had Member Vessels. If you can just introduce yourself, Member Vessels.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much. Dirk Wessels, a member of the committee.
Thanks. And is Member Marais online yet? Not yet. Okay. Member Stoffels, I know you've just walked in. If you catch your breath, if you just want to quickly say hello.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, everybody in the house. Morning.
Thank you very much. All right. So we have a quorum. I just want to start off by, before we get into the presentations, just by saying what a privilege it is to have Mr. Diner and his team, as well as the team from Cape Nature, present today. We know the immense amount of work and pressure that you have all been under over the past couple of months preparing for the storm, because we know that we were prepared and the warnings were going out, but also all the incredible work and the massive undertakings, I'm sure the late nights and early mornings, time away from your families, and the physical danger that you and your staff have put yourselves through to keep our residents, businesses, communities safe during this time. So, first and foremost, a massive, massive thank you and a privilege to have you present today to give us an update. Just before we go onto all of that, if we can also, if you can allow me to just ask for a brief moment of silence for the 11 people who lost their lives during those storms, and also all of those who have been affected. Thanks very much, colleagues. Just a procedural issue, if possible, members who are online, when you do speak, just in line with the speaker's new rulings, if we can, please try and put your camera on. It just makes the meeting more interactive. Obviously, if there is a challenge with bandwidth, then we understand. But if you are able to pop your camera on when you are speaking or asking questions, that will obviously be preferable. We will then move on to the first briefing for today. We do have apologies from Minister Burdell and the HODs Paulse and Gerber. But we have Mr. Diner, who is going to be briefing the committee on the recent storm damages and the steps taken to address that. And after that, we'll have the briefing by Cape Nature, and then some of our own administrative issues to deal with at the end. So I am not going to go through everybody present by name. I'll give Mr. Diner the opportunity to do that when he presents, as people are then asked to make inputs. So, Mr. Diner, over to you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. Good morning, honourable members. Yes, Colin Diner from the Provincial Disaster Management Centre, and then just with me is Nabil Rylands. Nabil is the Director for Disaster Risk Reduction. He was also the incident commander for this last week's incident. I was away. And then just Ms. Sonia Chinian, who is the Director Operations, would have joined us this morning, but she has to prepare. They are finalising the costing, which has to go to Cabinet for approval tomorrow, and it's quite a significant task. So if we can ask that she be excused. I'll go, the way that I will deal with this is I'm going to tell the story of both incidents. I'll try and do it as quick as possible. What were the warnings we received? Chair, I'll maybe speak a little bit about how they work as well. I don't think we've actually discussed that before in this meeting, and then just how we prepared, what the damages were, and then what our estimations are now. As I said, it is being finalised. It'll go to Cabinet tomorrow, and then we'll have a better idea after the final assessment. We actually have people in all over the province at the moment doing assessments. So the moment we have that, then we'll have a proper value. But I think the value we have now will be able to give quite a good indication. So we received a number of early warnings. Now, this is what is known as an impact-based warning. This is a project that was started by the South African Weather Services approximately between 12 and 10 years ago. It took a while to get established. The Western Cape Disaster Centre had quite a large input in this. And what this is, Honourable Chairs, this is not just telling us that it's going to rain or how much rain we're going to get. It actually tells us what the expected impact is going to be. So you will see that it is graded by different levels. And when you start going into a level 6 to higher, that's when you start seeing significant incidents. So just to give you an idea, the Kruger Park incident that happened earlier this year was a level 10. We got a level 8, which is a significant incident. We have a standard procedure in the Provincial Disaster Management Centre, and that is that if it is higher than a level 6, if we get informed by Weather Services that it's a level 6 and higher, we will then by default activate the disaster centre and bring in all the stakeholders so that we can prepare adequately. So level 8 gives you very high impact and a very high probability of it happening. So this was the warning we got for the Southern Cape. So there was a level 8 in the Southern Cape, moving up to a level 6 in the Central Karoo. And then as you moved away towards the Overberg, we saw a level 2. And then they basically tell you what the impacts would be like, for example, flooding of roads, communities, temporary cut off, major disruptions to traffic, the roads being flooded, mudslides, possible rock falls, and then damage to property infrastructure and loss of livelihood and livestock. Now, one thing that was of particular concern to us with this warning was, you will recall the fires we had in January, where in Mossel Bay specifically, where very large areas had burnt. So what happens is, after you have a rainfall like that or a fire like that, you lose the ground cover. And that makes the area much more susceptible to mudslides. So that was an additional concern that we had going into this incident. If I can just move on to the incidents that so it was not just for rains, but we also had one, and now moving towards the 10th to the 13th of May incidents. There was also one for very cold, wet and windy conditions, of course, which has a huge impact on livestock and agricultural production. And then we also saw the warnings that started coming in for the rest of we had dealt with the one incident, and then the following warnings, I'm just going to deal with all of them right now. We then started seeing very large levels of warnings coming in for the western side of the province, and that those would also be rain, strong winds, storm surges across the coast, of course, which then places a massive effect on coastal communities. And then also wind and wave warnings that we received down the coastline. So these are the warnings that we got. This is what we got to work with. And then we started looking at how do we prepare for this. Chair, we try and prepare well in advance. I think the important thing for us is preparation. We've proved it in the past that if we get the warnings, when you react on them immediately, it gives you just so much of an advantage. So we've set up this system over the years, and we've added components to it. Obviously, the Provincial Cabinet provides the political strategic oversight. But if I can take you to what we call the tactical level, which is the Provincial Disaster Management Centre. So we have the centre, then we also have a structure called the Provincial Disaster Management Advisory Forum, which are all stakeholders. That would go from the South African Police all the way to SANCOB if it's necessary for seabirds. It goes into the Maritime Rescue Coordination Centre. It goes to the various departments. So that forms part of the advisory forum. So it's a really big team that we are then able to bring in to assist us. And then at the bottom, we have our different joint operations centers, our JOC clusters, which I'll speak to in a minute, and then our priority specific working groups, which is in this province, mostly wildfires and flooding. And then over the last 2 years, we have set up the strategic decision-making team, which is the Interdepartmental Heads of Department Committee for Disaster Management. That is chaired by HOD Graham Paulser. And the way that works is all the HODs who could have some input or some responsibility to what that particular disaster may be. So it does change from time to time. There's certain HODs that would always be there. They would meet immediately after our meeting. So all the operational decisions that we make within the JOC can get actioned immediately. So if we need funding to happen very quickly, that decision can be made quickly. We have a reporting responsibility to the National Disaster Centre. However, they do not take the overall command of the incident in these incidents that we dealt with. We have set up this system, and this system is just so that we've got structure. When you deal with a disaster, and specifically when you've got a big humanitarian component, you can have a lot of different NGOs coming in. You can have various hospital groups coming in if it's a health issue. You can have various rescue organizations coming in. So to give this structure, we have divided all those activities that you would use in a disaster. We have set up into what we call our cluster system. And they are all then chaired by a provincial department representative. So you have the infrastructure, which is Department of Infrastructure, Municipal Infrastructure, Eskom. They all sit in that cluster. Humanitarian relief, we have Department of Social Development, which chairs that, and then we have like SASSA. We have all the NGOs come in there. We have one for shelter, which is human settlements, provincial and national. Then we have safety and security, which is a lot of the rescue organizations. That is generally chaired by the department itself, because we also have the responsibility for fire and rescue services. We have health. They will look after the private hospitals and also Department of Health and all those activities. Agriculture, education, and then the economic cluster, which looks at dealing with not only the businesses and tourism, but also works with the various consuls. So we have those structures in place, and then we have communication. So communication cuts across all of them, and the Premier's office communication, and then the various departments will make sure that messages are going out, or messages that have been cleared by the disaster centre and that are able to be speaking on one voice. One of the first risks that we looked at, and this is something that we would like to showcase here today, is the learner safety. So we have seen situations in the Eastern Cape last year where a bus ended up in the water and 15 children were lost. So one of our top priorities is how do we look after the children in the areas specifically where we have a lot of bus routes and we have a lot of pickup points in rural schools. So we have developed this system over a couple of years. What you're seeing there is potentially what the flooding could have looked like. So we're able to model what the flood will look like. And then what we do is we overlay all the schools, and then we overlay the bus routes, and we overlay all the pickup points, because every pickup point could be a child. And then what we can do is through that information, we can then advise the Department of Education, close these schools, close those schools. Your school might not be at risk, but your bus route is at risk. And that's why these decisions would then be made. And then we run these models, and through that, the decisions can then be made. Which schools do we close and don't we? So when we activate our disaster center, the first thing that we do is we look at what our objectives are. And our first objective is always going to be safety of people and the environment. The best way to make them safe is to warn them that something is coming. So we disseminate all the early warnings we get from weather services. We do a lot of proactive and ongoing public communication, and then we look what mitigation measures there can be. So if sandbagging has to happen, if precautionary evacuations have to happen, those things are done. And then we also look at what our rescue capability is. We have quite a strong rescue capability in the province, and then we move those people into the areas where we feel they would be mostly accessible to anybody that is in any peril. So the initial response, the decisions that we made, and our activation did happen 2 days prior to the incident taking place. So we were able to get everything in place in time, is to make sure that those early warnings reach the people that they must reach. There was a number of outdoor events that were going to happen, and we asked for them to be cancelled. And I think it's not a decision we take lightly, but we have to look at what the risk is. So there was a couple of road races that were cancelled. We have daily meetings, so we try to spend as little time as possible in meetings and more operationally. So our joint operations meetings don't go more than an hour. So we allow the districts to have their meetings earlier, and then they come to us, and then those decisions get made. So the learner safety I've already spoken to, that's critical. And then we also requested that all the districts that might be affected, that their joint operations center be operational. So we had to put a lot of things in place. The first thing we were concerned about was the acute stage of the incident. And we looked at what kind of response might be required. So the first one was air rescue. In terms of the garden route incident, we took the emergency medical services rescue helicopter, which is in town, and we moved it to the Southern Cape. We also moved South African National Defence Force and our own helicopters that we normally use for wildfires into the area to provide logistic support. And then we also asked the Department of Health and Wellness they have a drone program for their drones to be available so that we could access certain areas for information. And then we coordinated with the Maritime Rescue Coordination Center in Cape Town, considering the fact that we had the water issues, the wave height issues, and the storm surge issues that we might have to deal with. In terms of the swift water rescue and the mountain situation that could happen, our rescue teams from emergency medical services, as well as the municipalities, were put on standby. The SAPS made their water wing available to us, and they really did well. And we were able to take them and place them into a number of areas. For example, in the Southern Cape, we put a team in Oudtshoorn and we put a team in Knysna. And then we also spoke to NGOs who had teams in the Eastern Cape. If it became a major operation, we would move that in. And NSRI, another big partner of us, NSRI were put on standby, and they made their equipment and their teams available to us, which became very valuable, specifically when the flooding happened on the western side of the province. We also had the 4x4 capable teams that are NGOs that work officially with us on response to be able to take these rescuers and relief workers into the mountains if it was necessary. And then our urban search and rescue team, which we activated 2 years ago for the George collapse, we also put them in place, just understanding that should there be structures that are compromised, that we would be able to deal with that. And then apart from the rescue, we also have to look at what the other areas are that we need to assist. So from an infrastructure perspective, there are winter protocols in place from the Department of Infrastructure for human settlements, transport and infrastructure assets. SANRAL have what is known as the road management system, and they have that road management system on the N1, N2, and N7, and they were activated. They were also in our disaster center, and then we also looked at all the mountain passes, which generally are problematic, and they were put under 24/7 monitoring. And the areas we identified as, like, for example, areas that might have mudslides, etc. We asked Provincial Traffic to prioritize those areas so that if we did have a problem, we could immediately have them diverting traffic and making the area safe. Eskom have a number of rapid response units. They've been pre-positioned, or they had been pre-positioned and activated. We had the Department of Health and Wellness to ensure that we could provide emergency power if we lost any power to health facilities, and water tankers were made available for areas that would be without water. Communications, the centers, as I mentioned earlier, were activated. Radio broadcast emergency warnings were prepared. We also did speak to the cell providers, and we have in the past where we've lost communication in areas. Vodacom have come in, for example, and set up a communication system for us. They did it in Central Karoo 2 years ago when we lost those 7 pylons. So we can make sure that we have communications in. And then what we also did is through the Premier's office, we were able to coordinate with all the consulates, with a lot of people being here, visitors being here, that there was a number that they could call if there were any concerns that they might have had. And then we just, from a offshore perspective, what we get with these major winds and high waves is we get requests from vessels for sheltering. And then the MRCC, the Maritime Rescue Coordination Centre in Cape Town, we got them then to coordinate those activities, and the Port of Cape Town was also proactively closed for the second flood. So the impacts and the response, the high-level response, so the main priority from health was to keep the clinics open and keep the hospitals open and be able to move people into those areas. There was a huge number of rescue operations done. I think the most that we've ever seen, I'm not sure what the number is, but it was well over 50 rescues that were carried out in very difficult conditions. We had one situation in the Central Karoo where a family were totally cut off, and it took us 2 days to actually access them. We couldn't access them by air because of the weather conditions. Then from safety and security, the traffic incidents, they had to back up a lot of rescue operations, as I mentioned. The school closures, they continued in the Winelands, continued on the 11th of May, and then also all schools we closed on the 12th of May. The infrastructure cluster, there was the big issue that needed to happen there is we needed access. So the most important, I think it was during the second incident, we had 7 trucks that went over on one road, and we needed to clear that to be able to get Eskom, to be able to get the electricity in there. And then what happened is, of course, a lot of work had to be done. So there were people on standby to facilitate any environmental impact assessments that needed to be done. Agriculture, we had the agricultural organizations also in our center able to provide us with from the ground information. And then humanitarian relief was a very big effort. So Department of Social Development have set up all their NGOs that work with them, that they fund into different regions. So it was what they were able to do was to delegate those people to those regions they could move in. It was problematic to try and get humanitarian aid specifically up the West Coast into the Cedarburg area, but we made 2 of the provinces helicopters available to fly in those resources when we had window to do so, which was not always possible. Then the communication with business just continued through that cluster. So then just to go to some of the damage and the impact. Chair, I've got it broken down also into every district, but I'll just quickly go over those just in the interests of time. The most severely impacted areas at this stage, this was with the second incident, the Cape Winelands, Breda Valley and Witzenberg. And I'm sure we've seen a lot of those visuals. The West Coast District, Cedarburg, Matsekama, City of Cape Town, where there was a large number of floodplains and informal settlements. The impact in the Garden Route we know was severe, but during the second incident, fortunately, we did not see the kind of impact that we had during the first incident. Specifically during the first flood, we saw rivers and specifically around Keerbooms. Those were real concerns for us because of the height of that. And also then through Swellendam, the Breda River, where that river went up extremely high, and we were really concerned about that bridge. So that was also a crucial route for us in terms of our operations. And then in Central Karoo, the damage was mostly wind-related. The high-level impacts, 4 hospitals were impacted: Worcester, Caledon, Melamed in Gatesville, and Tukai. Fortunately, they didn't have to be closed. The Mitchell's Plain Hospital was without electricity for a while, and there was a rescue conducted in Wynberg where there was a fatality. Agriculture, livestock, and crop losses were reported. The preliminary assessments we try and do as soon as possible, and I'll get to that in a minute. Farm dams were continuously monitored. The school closures, I think we did school closures in the Southern Cape. Those were done on that model. But because of the impact that we had on the 11th of May, we decided to blanket close all the schools on the 12th, not only because of learner safety, but also we had to move resources. And it's, as you know, during school holidays, it's easier to drive. So the thing was that if there's nobody on the road, our emergency vehicles can move easier, our construction vehicles can move easier. So that's how the decision was made. You mentioned about the 11 fatalities, and if I can maybe just mention, these were all isolated incidents where you had 1, 2, or maybe 3 people being killed. Now, we always aim to have nobody, but it's the kind of incidents that you really can't plan for. A tree falling over and landing on a person could happen during a normal day or during a normal wind. And then the other concern, and we try to make that a very big thing in the media, is people trying to cross flooded areas. And that's where we lost quite a number of people. And Chair, I think in the last 3 or 4 years, all the floods that we've had, that's been our highest death rate, has been people trying to cross flooded areas. Sorry, I spoke about the 50 rescues in the one area, but all in all, 651 people were rescued. 8 people were injured. 231,029 persons were affected, of which 103 were in the city of Cape Town. And then approximately 3,700 people were housed in temporary shelters. The increase in the dam levels was approximately 30%. We have a lot of information on which dam levels, but for the purposes of this presentation, I'll just give a general report. 233 road disruptions and closures. Now, quite a number of them are accessible. And then there was widespread electricity damage, very well. The big challenge was getting there. Eskom had teams. They have brought in teams from Gauteng now to assist, but really it was access was the big issue. And then 22,890 houses were partially destroyed. And 56,000 people were supported with humanitarian relief, it's a large operation to carry out. Logistically, it's quite a big activity that needs to happen. Chair, these are just some of the photographs of incidents that happened across. I think we really have covered most of it in the previous slide, but just as you can see, as we mentioned, localized flooding in the city of Cape Town, a lot of road damages, trees falling over in the Cape Winelands, large areas of flooding, widespread power outages, very high river levels. The Huguenot Tunnel was closed for a while. And here we had quite a major operation. Because of the tunnel being closed, there was a backup of approximately 500 vehicles on the other side. And we had to carry out a humanitarian operation on 2 days or a day following that, where we needed to provide humanitarian aid to those people who were sitting in vehicles. And in that gridlock, it was difficult for them to move forward or backwards. Garden Route District, very hard hit. Again, also the infrastructure damage, the fallen trees. And then, unfortunately, we also had to deal with things like cable theft. So we were just working on one disaster and then had those challenges as well that we needed to deal with. In the Overberg district, we had a lot of power outages, specifically Swellendam. We obviously had the incidents with the rivers, the severe flooding in those areas, and communities that were temporarily isolated, and also the disruption to specifically in the outlying areas of services. The Central Karoo, Maringspoort, we know was a major challenge, and that will still be for quite a while. I spoke about the rescue operation that was carried out there. A mother and a newborn baby were airlifted to safety in one of the operations. So yes, it was not as impactful, but we did have a number of operations that we had to deal with there, and humanitarian aid that was being delivered by Department of Social Development. And the West Coast District, quite a lot of areas being cut off, a lot of emergency operations in trying to access those areas and provide food and humanitarian aid to those people. A lot of issues also with low water bridges and roads that were washed away, specifically in the Cedarburg area. And again, a very big humanitarian operation that needed to happen. And then in Lutzville, we had a specific issue that for 19 days, they were without power due to the high voltage pylons that collapsed into the water. Chair, we tried very hard to do very good proactive communications, not just on the storm that's coming, but what impacts there would be. And so with the Premier's office coordinating and our department, together with the other role players, information were like the weather early warnings. We provided advice to communities on what actions they should take. We indicated road closures on a daily basis, pedestrian and driver safety information, provided emergency numbers, and then drowning prevention measures. So there was quite a lot of media thrown at this incident, just in terms of trying to keep people safe. Unified communications, unfortunately, there was a lot of fake news that we had to deal with. But that takes a lot of your resources away when you're trying to focus on providing information. One of the ones that was really an issue was this level 10 tsunami warning. A tsunami is a seismic event. It's not caused by weather. But these are the kind of things that we needed to deal with. The state of dams, Chair, just to give you an indication there, aware of the time. So generally a 30% increase that we saw across the board. We have seen a number of balancing out now and leveling out now. A flood does not take you out of a drought is something that we need to understand. So although we've seen a lot of good relief, the long-term weather forecast for the rest of the winter season this year does still indicate below average. But these are cut-off lows, so it's really very difficult to predict what's going to happen. Just on the disaster recovery, Chair, there's two types of grants that are available. The one is funding for emergency response, the Municipal Disaster Response Grant and the Provincial Disaster Response Grant, and then the funding for reconstruction and rehabilitation, which is the Municipal Disaster Recovery Grant. So this is how the process works. This is where we are working at the moment. So initially, assessments have to be done to determine what the magnitude and the severity was. Once we know that, we can make the decision, do we classify or request this to be classified as a disaster? As we know, the National Disaster Centre have classified this as a national disaster because of the fact that other provinces have also been impacted. Then we look at what the damage assessments, what the damage is, and that's where we are now. So once that is done, we then look at what contingencies there are. We have to also look at our own funding. So you have to demonstrate when you do an application to the National Centre for funding, you have to demonstrate that you have also reprioritized your own funding to deal with it. So we will then do that and then confirm the need for whatever national funding we can get. The funding requests then go to the Provincial Disaster Centre. An analysis gets done, so we don't just take the request and send it through. We go and do an assessment ourselves. We go and see what it is specifically that needs. Is it insured? Is it not insured? What needs to happen? Once that is all done, verifications are done. The funding request is submitted to the National Disaster Centre with business plans on how we're going to deal with this. Once the allocation approval is received, we can then start with project implementation on repairing in those areas. This is the preliminary cost, Chair, as I mentioned earlier. So we're looking at municipalities in the region of 1.7 billion. And then we're looking at sector departments in the region of 7.3 billion. And then totally we're looking at around 9 billion damages. But this is really the preliminary assessment, understanding that the Eastern Cape, that Limpopo, and that Mpumalanga and that KwaZulu-Natal are also going to be put in. At this stage, it's impossible to say what allocation we will eventually be receiving. Just finally, while the immediate impact phase has subsided, we're continuing to monitor the situation and coordinating support. There's still risks of mudslides. There's still risks of flash flooding. The cold risk is still there. So electricity outages was the big priority. I think we are now the Deputy Minister of Electricity is with Minister Meyer today doing assessments as well. And then road closures are impacting accessibility. That is still happening, but those are activities that those departments are dealing with. There are areas where we still have to provide humanitarian relief, and that is ongoing. So we are still engaged, and we are still working. In fact, after this session, we will be having another joint operations meeting to gauge where we are going forward. Honourable Chair, thank you. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diner. A lot of very, very interesting information, some quite frightening as well, I suppose. I've got a couple of questions, but I just want to see members in the House. We're going to discuss this item first and deliberate on that, and then we will take Cape Nature afterwards, just so that we are able to give specific attention to the presentations while they're still fresh in our minds. Do we have any questions from members in the House? We've got Member Masipa and Member Stoffel for now, and then I'll take a question, and then we'll move online for the next three after that. Just want to acknowledge Member Murray. Welcome, Member Murray. I see you online. We will take your hand in the next round of questions as the first hand. Thanks. Over to you, Member Masipa.
Thank you, Chair, and my sincere apology. I had challenges in the morning. I must just, Chair, start by really commending the work of the disaster response. We had fire, my neighbor backyard, back opposite, had a fire the previous night, not this previous night, the other night. And the response there was really very quick. And if you did not invest in firefighting equipment and this, we would not have survived. I can tell you now that I would not have been able to be here because the damage would have affected me. So I just want to compliment you for really investing in firefighting equipment. So I did conduct an oversight visit just to see for ourselves. We were in Woolsley, we were in Rossonville, and the issues that we picked up there was access to clinics, the challenges of the mobile clinics, getting to some areas, when they were telling us this was the road, we couldn't really believe that was the road because it was the river there. I couldn't really imagine a road. I just saw a river. So I think really the question for me is around, how many, clinics are accessible now, if you have managed to quantify them. And in terms of the mobile, what you call the mobile clinics, able to go to those areas, especially in the farm areas. That was the question. The other question was relating to Eskom. I think partly you have answered it. Because when we were in Rossonville with one of the farmers, indicated that they don't have electricity. As you know, is it Dasberg one's cellar? Yeah, they had challenges further down there. Mr. Peters, we met with him, indicated the challenges of Eskom there. So the other, Chair, I hope you don't mind if I'm a little bit longer. The other issue that obviously, you have raised the numbers in terms of the estimated damage. Obviously, I don't think that we'll get this money. We have got the capacity in the fiscus to really be able to get this money. But the issue remains the turnaround time around, once this has been communicated, how quick the government come, and if they come, how would you employ this kind of funding that you receive? Because the big challenge for me is the farms, the agricultural sector on the farm, not outside the farm. This money is going to take care of your infrastructure and everything. Are you really maybe going to move to that level of just quantifying and qualifying the farm damage? Because here we're talking about, country's biological assets. If we don't have those biological assets, we don't have agriculture in the country. Totally is destroyed. You can fix the roads and everything, but if the farmers cannot get back to farming, then those roads, who would be using the roads? What kind of economic activity is going to take place? And I'm just asking if really, have you thought of moving into really assisting in terms of quantifying, qualifying, and assisting, and creating kind of a recovery plan for the sector specific? and I know I'm taking you to a private sector, but I think, it's important for our rural economy because, again, I'm saying that even if you really make good roads and so forth, if the farmers cannot really be able to get back on their feet and be able to farm, those roads are useless. I mean, you're not going to have economy. So I think the question really primarily, centers around how can you assist these farmers to be able to speedily, quantify, qualify, and assist them in terms of whether, the areas are recoverable. I mean, some areas, are now floods, call it rivers, on those farms. And I think they will need probably, Chair, they will need environmental impact assessment. And will the farmer really be able to afford to those costs of really determining how to farm now going forward, or whether this is now an area that is unfarmable? I mean, let alone, the proposition that you are making that, maybe the what you call the Banking Association of South Africa must come and sit down with the sector and say, how do we do this? And not only with the sector, but with the government, government maybe providing a guarantee so that, we can have a bit of a cash flow coming onto the farm. Because at the moment, the issue is how do we get the cash flow back onto the farms so that the farms can continue, not to make profit, but just cash flow to do the things that are necessary, for farming operations to continue and really kind of protect the economy and the livelihoods out there in the farming community. So, Chair, those are really my remarks, and obviously, some areas that maybe, Diana and the team can really reflect on. Thanks very much. And thank you really for the work that you are doing. We really appreciate. I mean, we have seen the images, and obviously the fake news was a bit of a problem for many of us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Member Masipa. Member Stoffel?
Thank you very much, Chair. And once again, a very good morning to everyone. Chair, let me appreciate the presentation from Mr. Diner. And on the same breath, I want to applaud them for the good work. And thank you very much for saving those 650 people. It's not playground. We know there was a lot of pressure on you from the entire province. So we really appreciate your good work. And yes, we agree with you that, Chair, that the disaster management is doing very good, especially when it comes in the province. But I think our emphasis should then be put on at our local levels. I think there is still a lot of shortcomings. In the first place, I think, Chair, we should then put more emphasis on the districts and the intervention. Some of us have experienced it. I have to call the HOD to come and assist from a district level. Our municipalities is not yet on the level they're supposed to be. We must acknowledge that. But how do we get that municipalities on the level of the province? I think we should work more around that. Because it's good for people to come and sit in a meeting and say, yes, we've got this in place and got this in place, because they are not yet in the situation. But when you are in the situation, that's when you will see. But in actual fact, very little is in place. Now, when I talk about municipal, that forum at a municipal level, I'm including all the various departments, like social department, infrastructure department, all those departments that are supposed to form that forum. So, but in the nutshell is that we are saying is that the money that is being allocated, because the question was there, Mr. Diner, to say why the municipalities cannot manage their own disaster funds. And then at that specific time, it was been said that municipalities don't have the capacity on that time. But still, till now, they don't have still the capacity. But whilst the most serious problems is transpiring at a municipal level. So we should look into that. And if I have to be more specific, let us go into the infrastructure of human settlement. Now, when we talk about infrastructure of human settlement, what are we talking about here at a municipal level? Because you are dealing with different human settlements, infrastructure at the same level. So I want more in terms maybe to expand, or maybe it will be wrong for me to say you must expand on that for us, so that we can have a better understanding when you talk about this human infrastructure, human settlement at that level. And then also, Chair, and thank for keeping our children safe. It was a good thing to close the schools, because Tina, who've been there on that disaster, we've seen what happened there. So thank you for that. And then when it comes to the rescue capacity, I think there we still have to look into what type of rescue capacity we need at these municipalities. Because you will find that some of them don't know how to approach a certain scenario. And for me, it's quite a bit of a worrying factor, because we have to look into that, especially when there's an indication of that level 8, and that depending on the levels, we should look into how do we deploy this to these rural areas specifically. Because when a building collapses, you've got children under that building. How do you get their children out? Because a normal fire officer won't get that child. It might injure the child more. So we must look in what kind of, when deploy in the capacity that we are deploying to this infrastructure. Then Member Masipa have covered me on the issue of in protecting our economic hubs. But in agriculture, my worry is also the small farmers. Remember, this disaster don't pick and choose. It just chayela everything in front of it. So we are faced now with livestock that is gone. We are faced with livestock that don't have food even now, of these small farmers. How do we deal with those? So I'm just adding on what Member Masipa was saying. Then we must acknowledge the social department is not yet on. What happened is that when the people is being moved to the shelters, the only thing they just make sure is that they go to the NGOs and talk to the NGOs. And these NGOs, some of them don't have enough food to give for these people. Must acknowledge that. Now we have a problem. The shelters that has been there, it's not for people to stay in. Remember, there's 90 families with the children, small children, big children. They have to sleep in one place. Imagine. Anything happened there. The first, those kids, some of their rights has been violated by the things that is happening there. Then you will get that the food is not enough. The NGOs in that place is not enough to give enough food to that 100 and something people. Now the people is starving. Then you've got the children that is traumatized about the whole situation. Remember when a shack falls on children? It traumatized those children. So I think as a disaster team in the province, we should put more emphasis to say we must, within what we are doing, we still got a responsibility to protect the rights of those people. And the municipalities currently, the shelters that they put in our people, it's not conducive. The toilets is broken, the doors can't close, the females, the males just sleep in 120 people receive from the district only 40 mattresses, 100 blankets. You sit with more than 100 people. Some as children, they have to sleep on the floor for weeks. As we speak, some of them are still there. Now we are saying, our rescue, is it only for that period that disaster is there, or will we look beyond the disaster in terms of assisting those families? I will pause there, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Stoffel, for those insights and questions. Just briefly from my side, I know there's a lot of discussion when it comes to the climate change issues. And as we're seeing, as you've mentioned, it's these intense fluctuations between extreme heat and floods that we're seeing more and more of, and an increase in that. And I'm sure you'll be aware, Mr. Dana, Mr. Shipley probably as well, of the words adaptation and mitigation that always come up when we talk about climate change. And I suppose my only concern is when one talks about the funding that's coming through, how much of that funding can be spent on adaptation to prepare ourselves for an increase in climate-related disasters, and how much of it is spent purely on sort of operational mop-up activities, understandably so, because we don't have enough to go around. But do you feel that there is enough being done in terms of adaptation planning and integrating new ways to ensure that we are kind of ahead of the curve? I know the province is already doing a significant amount, but if we are going to see an increase in the frequency of these events, I think that's very, very important. And I'm sure lessons learned, for instance, from the 2022 KZN floods. I know there were over 400 lives lost during those floods, devastating at the time. The fact that we've managed to only have 11 people pass away, it's still 11 too many, but 11 in isolated incidents, I think speaks a lot to lessons learned. So maybe just a little bit on lessons learned from other floods elsewhere in the country, and how we can improve maybe going forward. But there was quite a lot of information and quite a lot of questions there. So up to you, Mr. Diner, how you choose to respond. And if you want to hand over to anybody else for any other inputs, you're more than welcome to. And then we'll go online for the second round of questions, starting with Member Murray after that. Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I think I will deal with most of the questions. I'll ask Nabil just to speak about the agriculture questions that Member Masipa had. Just, I think, as far as specifically social development and agriculture, we can give feedback on our take with them, but I think I wouldn't like to misrepresent those departments in their strategic planning. However, so the mobile clinics or the clinics are all operational as we speak. We had 4 that were affected, that had to close. The mobile clinics are problematic in specific areas only because of access. So where we have road problems, which are still quite significant in a lot of the smaller areas, and I mean, I'm quite happy we can provide it, immediately after this meeting which roads are still closed. We can send that to the Secretariat, just if the members want to have that information. Eskom, the biggest challenge with Eskom at the moment is the isolated areas. So where you have one farm line, or you have a farmer or a rural area that is affected, that's where Eskom at the moment still have their biggest challenges, but they are at this stage between 95 and 97% recovered. And there has been a lot of, as I said, a team from Gauteng has also come in, so they actually have teams from outside the province already working. I think I'll deal with the expenditure, Chair, when I deal with Chairman Brown's question, because there is a problem as far as that is concerned, which I'd like to maybe just expand a bit on. So we are trying, Honourable Member Stoffel, really in terms of trying to capacitate the districts. Since 2013, the province has spent 250 million rand on fire and rescue services, of which a significant amount of that has been for vehicles. The others, I would probably say half has been spent for wildfires, and the other half has been spent on actually buying vehicles for the districts. So we've gone into the districts, we've identified in the smaller towns, you need a fire engine. We can't buy you a big modern fire engine of a few million rand because it has to go to Cape Town for services, and it needs quite specialized work where you have capacity issues. So we have built vehicles that are usable on those roads. Of course, as you mentioned, Chair, as was mentioned, there are specialized rescue capabilities that are required, and that is not always to be found. So what we've done over the years, and we are in the process of finalizing a flood rescue unit, which is a huge truck on a prime mover, like we have the unit in Breda Valley, which is the Urban Search and Rescue Unit, which we were able to move into George. So it's a strategic unit that can cover a very large area. So you have your smaller fire engines, rescue vehicles that can cover the day-to-day incidents. We have this program of strategic units, which could cover a much bigger incident over a larger area. So the Urban Search and Rescue Unit has been, we've had that now for about 17 years. We are now looking at a flood unit, which we've already purchased. We're just adding all the equipment, the pumps and everything that's required. That will be in the Garden Route. That will be in George, and it'll be able to move wherever it's required. And then so we're going to be building on every year, or every opportunity we get. We've, for example, also from a strategic perspective, implemented what we call a hazardous materials response program, because understanding that we have all these trucks driving on the N1 and N2 carrying very dangerous chemicals and cargoes. And so we have purchased 3 vehicles which sit on those highways at the district, able to deal with those types of incidents. So we try to create a capability. We also, the information systems that we build, all that information is also accessible in the district disaster management centers. So we try and make sure that it's not just in the province where we can run those models, they can do it. What we did is we realized that there's a dire shortage of disaster managers in many of the places. And in many of the areas, you might only have 1 or 2 people that work in the disaster center in the municipality, but if a disaster happens, it's all hands on deck. So we developed a course training 2 years ago. And what we've done is we've identified a number of models around geographic information systems, risk assessments, incident command, etc. And we've rolled that out to all the municipalities. So now, even if you are a firefighter or a traffic officer, or you might be working in spatial planning in a municipality, you come and do that course. And then if an incident happens, the disaster manager has you at their disposal. So we're trying to build capacity in those ways, understanding that, you know, funding is, we also have to compete for funding. So we try and do and be as economic as we can as far as that is concerned. And then social development has improved significantly, and where they've improved, and I know I'm speaking on behalf of them, but where they have improved is they now have a contract basis where they have, I think they have delegated 5 million rand, I speak under correction, to various NGOs who have bid. So now what happens is these NGOs get given the funding, And then as an incident like this takes place, they then delegate those NGOs into specific areas. In fact, they do it before the disaster. So what would happen is, like, for example, the West Coast, the NGO that was delegated there then have the responsibility of working in those areas. Then there are other NGOs on top of that who chose not to take part in that bidding process and in that contract, but also still get used. And I'm thinking, yeah, of an organization like Gift of the Givers who always come in and also assist us. So there has been a lot of improvement there. The numbers are sometimes very high, and access again is a problem. But we also note the issue around accommodations, which is generally quite a challenge that we have to face and that we will look at dealing with. The funding issue, I think the problem with the funding, and I'm speaking just about the disaster funding, is the parameters that we are given is not workable. Once you have done your assessment and you've done all your work and you've done the slide which I showed, once all that is done and it goes to National Treasury, an allocation is then done, which is normally not what you asked for. It's normally quite a lot lower. You then have to carry out that project. That project goes to a municipality, for example, if it's a municipality doing applying. It's different with the departments because they generally have the capacity to deal with it. But when it gets to a municipality, the municipality only has 3 months. Now, there is no way that you can do the kind of projects in 3 months. It's highly problematic. We try as much as we can. We have a sub-directorate at the disaster center, which spends pretty much all their time on those projects, trying to ensure that those projects happen. But it is very difficult because you're working on extreme timelines, and sometimes it's very large. So the Build Back Better or the improved kind of activity is really just almost not possible. Now, Minister Bartman yesterday in the Min-May made it very clear that she has now spoken to the National Minister of Finance, and she has asked for a meeting that we need to look at a different model. So she is on board with that, and it's something that we're definitely going to take up going forward. But it's highly problematic. There is, I can't speak from the other provincial funding, but from the disaster funding we receive, I would go so far as to say it's virtually impossible to build back better because of the timelines and because of the situation there. Honourable Chair, I think the biggest lesson that we've learned from the KZN, I was at the KZN floods with the rescue team from the Western Cape, so we saw firsthand what was happening there. It's preparation. It's really all about preparation. I think the fact that you cannot ignore an early warning is the most important thing. And I know Karen is also in our centre with these disasters, and I think she would also be able to tell you, we received the warning that the Western Cape, the western side flood was going to happen, or storm was going to happen on the Sunday night, and we had our first meeting on Friday morning before that. And then that allows you to prepare and to do make the kind of decisions around schools, to pre-position resources, that kind of thing. So I think that'd be the biggest. I'll just ask Nabil, maybe just around the agriculture, and then also, Nabil, if there's any lessons learned that you want to mention. Thanks.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Honourable Chair. Just in terms of the agriculture, so I mean, we have to acknowledge that it's a cornerstone of our economy, and I think with that they are part of the jock. And if you looked at the slide earlier regarding the clusters, they form one of the key pillars there. If we look at the damages that they've incurred, it's about 5 billion rand at this stage, obviously unverified. What they've got is agriculture's got a very nice app that they use. So they've got a standalone app where they actually go out into the field and capture the damages actually directly from the farmers. So that's quite a nice sort of innovation that they've introduced into the space, and we're looking at rolling that out for all the other departments as well, as we go through the recovery place. I think just in terms of risk transfer as well, I think the agricultural sector also probably, a large part of that is insured. So there is risk transfer in place. But I think, with the informing part of our cluster, there will be ongoing monitoring to see how we can support this process a lot better going forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. If I can just come in on the two issues, one around EIAs for recovery and reconstruction, and then to talk a little bit about adaptation and where we are. So there is an opportunity within the current law to issue what is called a Section 30A. It's for emergency circumstances. So generally this applies to the municipalities who need to clear sediment from something or bring a bulldozer into a river. So it's something that ordinarily, if you were doing it on a normal day, you would require authorization for, but now you actually have, you can literally get a verbal instruction from the department or something in writing, depending on how urgent it is. So if there's a need to save lives or livelihoods, it can be done literally over a telephone call. And what we've been doing is that our teams have been in the docks with the disaster center so that they're aware and alert as to where the biggest impacts are and the kinds of applications that they're going to get or the kind of phone calls that they're going to get. Just over this last month, for the first incident, I understand that our teams issued something around the region of 700 Section 30As. Now, remember, for each of those, they've got to apply their minds to that situation and whether or not it is legally fitting for them to give an emergency authorization. This most recent flood, an additional 300, and they're coming in now that people are doing that assessment. So the numbers may not be 100% accurate. I can get them from our teams, but there is no doubt that people are making use of that emergency response capability that the law has. Unfortunately, if something was predicted and known and is not threatening lives and livelihoods, it's not an emergency. You can do it properly later. And I think that's where the debate comes in, because a lot of private sector want to push that everything is an emergency. And sometimes the answer is no, you know that you built too close to the river, or you built on that sand dune, which you shouldn't have. You've pushed things further than they should have gone, or you were acting illegally. And now you're trying to fix it after the fact. So there are an awful lot of circumstances where it's not appropriate to do a Section 30A, because actually people are going to do more damage when they try and repair things. And especially along river edges, along the coast, if you start building hard infrastructure around your property, it just pushes the energy to your next door neighbor. So you really need to do that properly. You can't just do it as a go and toss rocks into the river and hope for the best. Just in terms of adaptation, so that very much is our focus. And I'm very happy to say that the Department of Infrastructure has included in their infrastructure strategy for the province, both a recognition of what we call ecological infrastructure. So basically everything that forms the surroundings in which our hard infrastructure exists. So our catchment areas, our river systems, our coastal systems is now part of that infrastructure picture. And you'll hear from the Cape Nature presentation in a moment as well. They play a very big role because a lot of our strategic water source areas are actually managed by Cape Nature. So the conversation that we're having now, and it joins with a conversation about the disaster fund, because what you will notice is that's basically government spend that you're seeing. That 9 billion rand is what it's costing government. That is not what it's costing the economy. That is not what it's costing the household who has now lost everything. So those costs are lost in our system, and they really shouldn't be. We need to be saying, well, actually, this isn't a 9 billion rand set of floods. It's double or triple that, because if you look at the households who are trying to recover, the small farmers who have lost all their livestock, don't have insurance, where do they go, and how much support is actually given to them? So I think there's a lot of work we have to do on adaptation, but it certainly is starting with us making sure that we're doing things like alien clearing in our catchments, because when a tree trunk comes down a river, it hits the bridge very differently, or it causes the water to back up that much more, and then it's a swell of water that eventually knocks out the concrete. So it is about coming together, identifying those things that are most at risk and making sure that we're doing the right things upstream, and then also in our coastal areas around the estuary, because that was another area we didn't particularly talk about it, but whenever there's big storms coming, we check the estuary conditions and whether or not those estuaries are open to allow that water out, and if we have to breach them, if we have to go onto the beach and physically take the sand away so that that water can go out and flush the estuary. Otherwise, it floods anybody who's around the estuary mouth as well. So a lot of work's happening. We need a lot more work. I think we need a lot of focus on it. And it's something that must be pulled through by every single department. We know climate change doesn't pick who it affects everybody, but there are going to be winners and losers. And unfortunately, with the number of occurrences, the frequency, the intensity we're seeing, we definitely need to get ahead of that curve, and we're not there yet. Simply building back the same, which is what a lot of people do because of the kinds of pressure around the grants, the pressure on doing an impact assessment, etc., means that we actually need to be doing that thinking before the disaster, so that when it comes to rebuilding, we actually already have the plans for a better bridge or a more resistant or resilient road structure or something else. So, and I know that Cape Nature has had to do exactly that for some of its infrastructure, and they'll be talking about that experience as well. So I hope that helps.
Thanks very much, Ms. Shippey and Mr. Diamond, your team. Yeah, I mean, Ashton Bridge, I suppose, is a prime example of building back better, but at substantial cost. I mean, I think also the lessons learned. I mean, we're talking about things that one can move on, but the lessons learned during these crises, I suppose, is the same as the water crisis of 2017, 2018. There are a lot of things that we can also impart knowledge to other parts of the country, other parts of the world, in terms of our response. And I think it's also important that we ensure that we continue to be part of those local and global forums, so that we can share and learn from others. But those are some fantastic inputs. Thank you. We are going to break for tea in between these two presentations, just so everyone can catch their breath. But first, we're going to take Member Marais, who has his hand up online. Anybody else online? It's only, I think, Member Marais and Member Wessels. I don't see Member Wessels' hand. Is there anybody else in the chamber? We've got a follow-up from Member Masipa and a follow-up from Member Stoffel. And then we'll take those answers, and then I think that will probably be the end of the discussion on this particular item. Member Marais.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the team and Mr. Diner and your team for extraordinary measures that you have to take now. I know the pressure is not off you yet, and a lot of pressure is still coming, but we trust that we will, the team will deliver as they always do. But Mr. Diner, I just wanted to touch on, I just have 3 questions. Number 1, I'm going to be straight to the point. Do you think that in certain instances, that the winter readiness programs of municipalities are effective if we look at the frequency and the intensity of weather conditions of the past, the past 2 years that we've experienced? A lot of the municipalities makes use of they outsource winter readiness programs. And I'm concerned that winter readiness programs in some instances are no longer effective. And then I also wanted to know whether any record has been kept of the measures taken by these municipalities in order to mitigate flooding. Is there an actual record of things that they do in terms of their winter readiness programs? Then the early warnings that you spoke about, I thank you for that information. I just wanted to know, when you refer to NGOs, do you also refer to individuals that are part of let's say, a protocol in times of emergencies? If there is an early warning, certainly you communicate that, and in this instance, you.
Member Marais, we've just lost you there for a second. I don't know if you've gone muted or... Can you hear us, Member Marais? Okay, we'll come back to you if you want to finish your question in a bit. We'll just move on first to Member Masipa for his follow-up. There are no other online, Member Masipa. Yes, but he can't speak. Nothing's coming through.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, my follow-up was with regards to the the statement made that farmers are fully insured. Not fully. Okay. I think the issue, Chair, is that from sources that I got the information, is that farmers are really struggling. There's been a request to Banking Association of South Africa.
Mr. Chair, I'm so sorry about that.
No problem, Member Murray. Member Murray, I've just allowed Member Masipa to start with his questions. So as soon as he's finished, I'll come back to you to finish. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Banking Association of South Africa has received requests from farmers to consider even restructuring their debts. So if you start doing that, then obviously it put a country risk. Their loans become quite risky in terms of pricing and so forth. So it's not really a good option to look at. But I think we've got an opportunity here to sit around the table and look at what are the really constructive solution that could help, our farmers, dealing with the climate issues. And hence I'm putting this to this team because of your expertise in managing the climate issues, because obviously your input will weigh more in terms of building a financial risk model and building the kind of insurance that you want to build, or even building a guarantee that you want to build, because all you just need the cash flow into the farming system. You are not subsidizing them. We're not calling for subsidy, but just to bring the cash flow, to the level that the farmers can farm. And what you're doing is that you protect food security. You're not really, I know that the issue of the World Trade Organization is all about, we can't create an unfair advantage, but we also can't create, a situation where rural towns, go into ghost towns, and then we don't have farming anymore, or we end up with conglomerate, being the ones that are operating in those areas. So I think the request from my side is maybe, a real consideration, Chair, is this team really working with the farmers to really assist in terms of really providing call it a scientific approach to this in terms of financial modeling of how are we going to really be able to protect the farmers going forward. I know that I did speak in the House to say, Honorable Minister Bartman, to look at a model of maybe, bringing government and finance together in terms of building an insurance product, call it the index product that, is being spoken in the marketplace. Chair, that's really just my follow-up on that point. Chair.
Thank you. Member Murray, we'll come back to you just to wrap up your question and input.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Yes, and then, Mr. Chair, in terms of, I know it was mentioned that Mitchell's Plain Hospital was without electricity. I wanted to know whether we could just have an indication how long were they without electricity, and were there contingency plans in place that we are aware of in terms of that incident? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Murray. And then finally, Member Stoffel, your follow-up.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me appreciate the response from Mr. Diner in his department. Chair, I just want to ask more about, I think, the winter protocols that is in place for human settlement. I'm not been clarified there on that one. And then thank you very much on the issue of small farmers, the response there. But my worry is the one disaster is catching the other one. That is my worry. Because remember, they didn't recover from the previous one. Now again, it's another one, and we don't know what will happen tomorrow. So those people are in a very devastated stage. And it's like Member Masipa is saying, some of them is living out of that. And I don't know how the department is going to deal with it, but at some stage, really, there should be a rapid plan from the department, and just to do a kind of a census to say how many of these people is in that situation to rescue for now, whilst there is no disaster now. And then the other one is that, yes, I agree, Mr. Diner, through you, Chair, that the social department might be performing good, but at local level, we can't confirm that. So maybe what should then happen, they should provide us or come and make a presentation, but that is a suggestion as a resolution, with a list of the NGOs in these various municipalities. Maybe that can also assist us to when we are faced with this disaster. Then we know at least where to go and how to engage with them in terms of the challenge faced on that moment. Then the other one is that, yes, we agree. It's not only City of Cape Town when it comes to informal settlements. It's the entire province where informal settlements is. We've got a crisis. But I wanted to check with the department whether within the 1.7 million, or is it billion or million? Billion. Is this informal settlements included? Is they included there? Then the other worry in the province is the state of dams. I'm very much worried about the state of dams in the province when it comes to these levels. Some dams is not on standard. And what are we doing about it? Because it's a threat to our people. Or are we going to wait up until that? Because really, I was very scared when I saw the Breerivier. I didn't want to pass over that bridge. But a dam next to my house, and then the owner of the dams, you will find that some of the dams is not even registered. What are we doing as a province about that? Are we going to wait for, what was that dam there? Yeah. Are we going to wait for such a scenario? So I think on that one, we're supposed to get also an input from your side. Then when it comes to municipal recovery grant, at what stage does a municipality qualify for that municipal recovery grant? At what stage? And is municipalities aware about that? How to? Because seemingly some of the municipalities, they are not on part when it comes to that. They keep on putting people in devastating conditions, whilst there is such. Then my last one is that in terms of the monitoring and support, when we monitor, what are we monitoring? Are we just monitoring for the sake of, no, it is in place? Or are we making sure that physically this is in place? Or does we depend on reports? Because this is what is happening. People just give a glory report whilst at ground level, it's not a situation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Stoffel. All right, Mr. Diner, your team, if you can just give us some answers and then maybe some closing comments from your side as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. I think to just Honourable Member Murray's questions, the winter readiness is in many cases very effective, but it's not across the board. So I think I would not be representing it properly if I said that every single municipality was effective. But I would like to say one of the things we saw, which could actually be an example, was what we saw in the Garden Route. The fact that we did not see the structural damage in George and in Mossel Bay and those areas was. So we do a lot of work. Nabil's team does a massive amount of work. It's not just about receiving the winter plan. It's about going to look whether it's done. And then it's also, was everybody involved? Corin's point about estuary, being standby, that has to be in the plan. So, there's all that stuff has to be in place. So we do 2 municipalities and 2 provincial departments a year that we, is that right? That we do their plans with them. So it's not that we just request a plan, we actually work through that plan with them. And so I think in that regard, there are municipalities that need assistance where you do have capacity problems, and that's why we try and build capacity wherever we can go. It's an ongoing thing. Minister Bradell always says that it took 10 years to build a disaster system, and I think we need to realize that this is a thing that takes time to build. Then I'm not sure the early warning, maybe just around early warning. So the way that we disseminate early warnings is all the advisory forum members get it. All the departments receive the early warnings. We do have certain individuals who we work with who are specialist engineers at universities or people, water experts, or who are also part of that early warning process. So the disaster management system is really very big. When we have, at the height of this incident, when we dealt with the JOC meetings, we had about 140 people in that meeting, which represents roughly, I would say, 60 different organizations. So we really try and include everybody that is in any way involved in our early warning meetings. The Mitchell's Plain issue was a same-day repair. The fault was identified, and it was able to be back up and running in the same day. So it wasn't too much of an issue, but obviously we have to keep an eye on every report that comes in. The solution, I think, around the farmers, I think with Minister Bartman's discussions with National Treasury, which we will also be part of, being disaster management funding, I think that is a point that we will also raise there in terms of what Honourable Member Masipa requested. Then just in terms of I think the winter protocols for human settlements, it's not something that I can actually address directly. It's not the department. They work with us in the centre. They respond to different issues, but we can also make sure that those replies come through. I think, Chair, yes, we have dealt with. I just took when the member was speaking. In the last 2 years, we've dealt with 12 disasters of different natures. So it is, the volume is extremely high. And I think that the continuous investment in our districts to be able to get back to work does give us the opportunity to be able to respond to them. But it is a very big challenge for us. I think a lot more work we would like to be doing on risk reduction. And Nabil's team is generally assisting with response most of the time, just because of the fact that the volume of incidents is as high as what it is. It was our busiest wildfire season in the last 20 or 30 years. And following that, we're now facing the flood season. So it is a big challenge as far as response is concerned. Informal settlements, we will have to, as soon as, I think if we can be allowed to just provide the breakdown once we get it. It would be very difficult for us to make an assessment right now, just in terms of what money could be allocated to where. The dams, we do work with hydrology from the Department of Water and Sanitation. So the hydrology unit comes in at early warning. They have to provide us an update all the time, but then again, it's their dams. It's not all the other dams. So, but we do have emergency protocols in place for certain dams. if I take the Wemmershoek Dam, we have a very small group which includes the City of Cape Town, Drakensberg and Stellenbosch. It's chaired by HOD Paulse. And then what happens is we monitor that when we start getting risk on that dam on an hourly basis. We have actually met already on some occasions at 2 o'clock in the morning. We've had to make a decision to let, because the problem is if you let water out too much, you go into the summer with a potential water crisis. So it has to be managed very carefully. We are planning going forward to develop a model of all the dams in the Western Cape and the river systems. It's going to be a very costly exercise. We're looking at funding, how we can get additional funding for that. But we believe that if we get that, it's going to give us a massive advantage in preparation and prevention. So that's a project, Nabil, and I've been working on now for a while. The municipal recovery grant, that grant only comes after a disaster. So once the disaster happens, what we then do is the districts represent the municipalities in the disaster center. Because disaster management is a function of district municipality and not local municipality. So what then happens is we ask the districts, please provide us with your risk assessments and then what your municipality's requirements are. And then they have to work with them, and then we receive those damage reports. They have to give a business plan to say this is how we're going to repair the problem. We then, once we get the approval from National Treasury through the National Disaster Centre that funding has now been allocated to a municipality, then our work as the province is to monitor that project, to look at the timelines. And I must say that that unit of ours is very effective. They are on the road more than what they're in the office. So it's not a question of getting reports. The big problem, Honourable Chair, is that we do not have the authority. The authority sits with the National Disaster Centre, and we can report. So where the problem is, if we see things that we're not happy with in terms of the quality of the either we can through Riverlands, for example, we put a lot of pressure on the people doing the construction, or we have to report it. But we would be in a much better position, and something we'll raise as well when we meet with Treasury is that we actually could have the authority in some way to control how that funding works, because that's a real problem. Chair, I think Nabil from your side. Chair, yeah, I think just to also thank you very much for yourselves, because I think the important thing is that we need to also know where we're going wrong and what we need to do to improve ourselves. There are a lot of challenges, and it's important for us to see the perspectives. We've also learned a lot today in terms of how we can take our process forward. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mr. Diner, Mr. Rylands, and Ms. Shippey. Greatly appreciated all your inputs and all the hard work as mentioned. We are going to take a little break now, just for 10 minutes. So please feel free, come join, have a quick cup of coffee and a snack in the dining hall. And we'll meet back here at 11:15 for the Cape Nature presentation. Thanks. In terms of timing, okay, right, we should be fine. All right, Mr. Ismail, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just by way of introduction, I'm Shiraz Ismail. I'm the Executive Director for Ecotourism and Access. I'm also joined today by our Executive Director, Mbelelo Jacobs, who has just started with us the 1st of June, but he's no stranger to Cape Nature. He's been around for many years and comes with a wealth of experience. We are also joined today by Wilfred Williams and Dion Rousseau that will be taking us through the Cape Nature presentation, Chair. So without any further ado, I think we can go into the presentation. Thank you.
Honourable Chair, honourable members, thank you very much. On to the first slide. The idea is not for you to be able to read every single land parcel there, but it's just to give you an idea of how Cape Nature is situated within the Western Cape landscape. We've got reserves, right throughout the province. About 1.1 million hectares. It's about over 100 land parcels, and mainly mountain catchment areas with some low-lying reserves as well. And all of these areas have been hit at least once with the extreme weather that we've had in 23, 24, less so in 25, and again this year. Next slide. As far as the key reactive operations were concerned, as with the fires that we had in October last year, we were caught early. We're used to having our main fire season December to April or May, and October and November was our really high fire season or number of fires. And May sort of caught us a bit by surprise, but we were still ready. And we knew what needed to be done. So the proactive, the reactive operations that we did was to ensure that reserves that were going to be hit were closed in time, so that we didn't have people unnecessarily there. Non-essential staff were evacuated. Staff were put on standby at home, and those staff that could work from home worked from home. We have closed most of our trails until the 30th of June, depending on which reserve we're looking at. That gives us time to do a bit of an evaluation on how damaged the trails are and what we still need to do in order to open them up again. We also did inform our clients, customers, the general public out there on our website, warning of reserve closures. And any clients that were on the nature reserves were evacuated piecemeal, meaning, depending on which reserves we knew were going to be hit, we sort of proactively evacuated those clients. Because of the lead time that we had, thanks to Dr. Diner and his staff and the weather services, we could get a very good lead time on being able to stock up on fuel and food, that type of thing, knowing that power was going to be cut to certain reserves, and they would need fuel for their generators and so on. There was also an immediate response to prevent any further damage at reserve level. So it was, sort of almost while the floods are happening, trying to prevent further damage. And then we did prioritize electricity and water restoration where possible. So Cedarburg was quite badly hit, especially by one of the sewage pipes. So those went out on deviation from SCM, supply chain management, to ensure that that was repaired as quickly as possible to prevent any further polluting, that type of thing. And then obviously, made sure that all our staff were safe. Thank you. Next. Sorry. There we go. So the damages across Cape Nature, this is obviously now since the extreme weather, we've gone out, most of our staff have gone out, and they've been doing it literally on a daily basis to determine what the damage was. As I'm not sure if you know, but we were allocated 183 million rand from the 23-24 flooding period. And DOI, Department of Infrastructure, is managing and running that funding. And we managed to spend about 93 million of that by end of March 2026. And unfortunately, a significant portion of that has been re-damaged. So we have to basically go out again. V3 was contracted by DOI to do the evaluation, so they have to go out and reevaluate and determine what's new damage, what's damage on damage, and what's new damage on stuff that has been fixed. So it's quite a that's quite a task. So yeah, within Cape Nature, we've had management roads, access roads damaged, hiking trails badly damaged, low water bridges washed away. So that's on and off reserve. And obviously, if it's off reserve, it's a problem for our staff to get to the reserve. And sometimes they've been cut off on both sides, so they really are stuck where they are. Jetties have been swept away. Examples: Keerworms and Gokama Nature Reserve just outside Buffalo Bay, and of course Breda River was significantly hit as well. Staff housing on reserves was damaged due to the wind, and then, as I mentioned, electricity, wastewater, and water disruptions as well. On the bright side, the Build Back Better is working, meaning that sort of over-engineering certain things to be able to handle volumes of water is working. An example would that be the crossing at Mikey's Rafid, which was completely washed away in 23 and 24. And now with the Build Back Better, it survived the flooding that we had this year. So Build Back Better is working. And then obviously there are ecological infrastructure impacts, and that would include erosion, scouring of rivers, landslips on reserve. But we always look at the bright side, and landslips and landslides can be future fire breaks. So we do look at it. We do look at it that way. And then invasive alien vegetation within catchments. So if we have done clearing, invasive alien species usually have a taproot system, not an adventitious system like fynbos does. So we do find that there's a lot more washout of silt and sand that goes into the rivers, and then unfortunately into the dams as well.
Okay, thanks, Dion. Chair, thank you very much. So I'll just take you through some of the damages at Cape Nature in and out of the reserve. And ironically, is one of the photos that Colin had on his slide. And this is just outside of the Cedarburg. But what it does demonstrate is that we've got to look at collective approach to fixing roads. If we don't fix that road, for example, it deteriorates further in the next slide. And then the resultant damage on the slide on 8 Cape in our tourism facilities, that we aren't able to fix our roads and our infrastructure because it's just more of the same. So we have collective design teams with our team and the team of DOI and the district municipality to look at mitigation and preventing further disaster at Cape Nature facilities. You can continue on the slide, which is impacts on Bosherberge. Yeah, so those are the damages that we incur as an entity. On the next slide, we were required to close our tourism facilities, and this is at the end of the flood. The floods came through at the highest point of the window in these facilities. So there's extensive damage in the units as well, loss of furniture, fridges, etc. So we have a plan. We've done extensive mapping on flood damage 1 in 100. And in this case, it was the worst case in 1 in 200 year floods. So we're mitigating for that. In terms of Cape Nature, and it is not dissimilar to what Colin has presented, we also experience electricity damages across the different nature reserves. We have installed quite a number of solar interventions across Cape Nature. Those were damaged by debris and trees that is either blown over or fallen, or blown straight off from staff or guest facilities. The next slide is also in the Cederberg, and one issue that we're dealing at Mikey's at Ottentots Holland. If we can go to the next slide. The picture on the left is the access bridge, the Witbrug as we know it locally in the Cederberg, and that's the lifeline between the Postdorp community and our Cederberg hub. So the bridges washed on both sides. The bridges survived, and we have fortunately received an STTA approval from the National Department to commence work, which our engineers have instructed. In the Nieuweberg community, this is the third year in a row that area washes away, and there are temporary fixes to that. In the last 4 weeks, emergency services could not access the community. There were 2 funerals that we had to host because the hearses refused to drive across the bridge. That we also received STT approval for yesterday, and immediately upon receiving that, our engineers instructed the contractor. We have a contractor, fortunately, on site to order and acquire the necessary material. So that will be temporary in nature, but it will be a good fix. And then we'll do a full-on basic assessment for permanent installations there. We've got, as the province, bridges washed away on reserves. That serves one, conservation operations as well as tourism, but also in the cases of certain reserves, contribute to and aiding firefighting. As with the province, we've had damages to slipways, waterways, jetties washing away in specifically our coastal reserves, Keerworms Nature Reserve, Gaukama, and so forth. And then just the next slide. And that's Keerworms Nature Reserve. And the slide following that one is that we also, like the rest of the province, experience ecological damage, loss of life in a different form, with our different animals on the reserves, and then rock slides and mudslides across Cape Nature, which does impact on the work that our staff has to do from an ecological point of view, but it's also these issues that are risk to our guests and visitors to Cape Nature. Then hard hit on the next slide is 2 islands, Dussen and Daya, which we are also closely working with DOI and V3 to put the necessary mitigations in place. These are old buildings. The slide following that is Lambert's Bay Bird Island, where we had the roofs ripped off on our main center. The slide on the right is our environmental education center at Grootvadersbos Nature Reserve, and it's often used by schools. To date, we've lost 1,241 days of business. Bookings impact was 307. Our total loss of revenue and refunds is just more than R1 million and probably counting as we speak. Our guesstimated potential revenue loss, barring that there's no rain or events going further, stands at around R2.5 million. We have 46% of our tourism facilities open, 43% closed, and then certain reserves are partially closed. We might have overnight accommodation available, but trails are closed in different reserves. Then I think a slide that we immensely proud of is the cooperation between communities, landowners, and Cape Nature in addressing the issues, making sure that there's safe passage, making sure where communities are cut off that there's food, water, and the necessities in order to survive. And these are only temporary fixes while we're dealing with the permanent solutions on these. And Dion will speak to the last slide in terms of what we are doing proactively with the money that we have from disaster management.
Thanks, Wilfred. So after the 23 and 24 flood episodes, we did do a assessment through disaster management. Our initial assessment was significantly high, but we don't have the in-house skills to, to cost certain things. So we did have some issues around that. We did eventually get 183 million, which I mentioned earlier, which is managed by the Department of Infrastructure. But as part of the 183 million, all the projects that needed to be done were brought to shovel ready, which is good, but also because there's damage now again, those projects are also going to have to be reassessed. So there's a cost attached to that. So that's unfortunate. But as of last year, the final assessment by V3 through DOI, the shovel-ready projects were 563 million rand. There are maintenance management plans for road infrastructure, and there is a process of application with the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. As I mentioned, at the end of 25-26 year, 93 million was spent on restoration and repairs. And then the emergency applications, the Section 30s through DFFE are underway. And I think yesterday we received 7
Yeah,
approvals.
so we received 8 approvals yesterday from the National Department to continue with the emergency repairs. And upon receiving that, our engineers acted immediately. So the pictures that we showed previously, those are the ones that we are attending to. I think Karen said earlier on that not every flood event is an emergency. So we needed to sit down with the team and really determine where there are potential loss of life, impacts on communities and our staff, and we identified those 6 reserves as a matter of priority. And I must say that the responses from the National Department is very quick. Telephonically, we met on Friday. They required additional information, and just after 3, we got a call. You approved, go ahead. And then our EAPs that we have appointed will then continue to complete the necessary paperwork for STTA.
And then just as far as assessment of the damage that we've had now in the last month, again, disaster management has been quite proactive, and they are, as we speak, on our nature reserves, assessing the damage that they can feed back to disaster management and to Dr. Dana. So that is happening now as we speak. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Yeah, so we can open up to some questions. I mean, I think just firstly from my side, if you can maybe just expand a little bit on the threats to, I mean, we've spoken about some of the issues with alien vegetation and fynbos and that. We saw the one zebra there, unfortunately, who'd come a cropper. But I mean, moving from fires into floods, I know there's certain animals that get impacted more by fires and some by floods, and we've had kind of a double whammy. I mean, are there any specific unique threats to any of our unique species from these ongoing disasters? I mean, I'm thinking about some of the species that are endangered or critically endangered. We often think of other threats, poaching and environmental loss caused by expanding human settlements, but in terms of natural disasters, are there any threats? Colleagues, questions, follow-ups? We've got Member Stoffel. Okay, Member Stoffel for now.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, let me appreciate the presentation. We know under very difficult circumstances, you have managed what you could manage. And thank you for that. My first question is pertaining in terms of the damaging, and I'm referring to the whole mapping. Was there any fatalities? And then also in terms of the specific dams within the Western Cape, is there whereby it have flooded and even destroy any important plant species within the Western Cape. And how quick can that or nature recover that has been damaged? And especially when it comes to these important species, I'm referring to that. And then also in terms of these shovel-ready projects, how many projects are we talking about here? And the impact of those that has been damaged. Is it long-term recovery or is it short-term? Thanks for now, Chair.
Thank you. And Member Masipa, the last one in this round.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for the presentation. In terms of my question, Chair, relates to the impact and to Honorable Stoffel's question. I do note on slide, what slide number? Slide 17. You do indicate the days lost and so forth, but I think the question is, what is the damage to the tourism infrastructure? I think if one can get an indication as to the impacted or the affected infrastructure of tourism. And you do indicate the booking lost. Have you also determined as to what has been the impact in terms of the jobs? You know, if they started rationing, you know, like maybe, you know, instead of coming the whole week, you come 2 days a week, and all those kind of challenges. I do note that you have been allocated money to support and so forth. So maybe in terms of accessibility to all the, call it the, what you call the areas for visitation, have all been the hospitality areas, have all these places been open for driving through? Do we have notification, you know, would I say worldwide? Is there a way that, you know, you are communicating this message, you know, outside, you know, just the confine of the joke, maybe, you know, to the outside in terms of South Africa is good for business, you can come and so forth, you know? Are there those kind of advertisement to just indicate that we are good for business? You know, we've gone through disaster, we are ready, you know? And I think that's probably a message that I haven't seen, you know, out there, that, you know, we are good, we are ready for business. I do note that there's been cancellation of about 306 bookings. This 306 bookings, are you able to break them down? Which area has been severely affected and which has been least affected? And maybe, you know, the key question will be, are this national or international? If you are able to provide that, that will really also give us a sense in terms of what recommendations are we going to make once we're done with this meeting. Chair, thank you very much. That's my inputs on this one.
Thanks very much. Mr. Ismail and your team?
Thank you, Chair. I think just from our side, as far as memory serves, there's been no fatalities on any of the Cape Nature reserves. I think, and a lot of it's got to do with us being proactive. Dion serves on the jock with Provincial Disaster Management, so he gets first-hand information. The minute he gets that information, we deploy it across all the nature reserves. And I think Dion did mention that this time we've got that early warning system, which gave us sufficient time to prepare and get things in place. Chair, I'm going to refer the rest of the questions to Dion and Wilfred. Are they best positioned to deal with that? Dion?
Thank you, Chair, honourable members. So just on the rare and endangered species, so, you know, to a certain degree, this is a natural occurrence. Granted, we shouldn't be having 1 in 100-year floods in 3 years, and keeping that in mind. But from a, we know where most of the critically endangered or endangered species are, and if a landslip were to happen in that area and it was a critically endangered species, then unfortunately that would be an issue. We would probably still need to find out, because a lot of the sections on the reserves that we can't see by road are inaccessible. So we will we will be getting that information over the next couple of weeks and months. I think as far as animals are concerned, with fires, animals know to move out of the area. And I think with flooding as well, they do sort of instinctually know that they must move out of the area, unless it's obviously been cordoned off with fences, that type of thing. That could be an issue. I think you mentioned the no fatalities. I think Honourable Member Stoffels, you requested the shovel-ready projects, the information on the shovel-ready projects. Do you want to go on to that, John?
So out of the previous assessment, we have 27 shovel-ready projects to the value of 563 million rand. And as Dion said, we have to assess that additional damage on the 563 million rand. Included in the shovel-ready projects, we have done applications for maintenance management plans to the National Department. And what that means for us is that once we have the MMPs approved, currently we have 8 approved, we never have to seek approval from the National Department ever again, because our MMPs are into perpetuity. We've done it for the WIP, we've got for Aneisburg, and that creates the ability to react a lot more swifter to these disasters going forward. In terms of tourism damage, we currently have a high-level assessment at roughly 32 million rand, but it also includes operational conservation operational facilities like reserve offices, sewage and water infrastructure, electricity, and so forth. What we are doing with the V3 team is to delve into each reserve and to do an assessment of the exact damage. So we have a suite of quantity surveyors and architects appointed as part of the disaster management planning process within the entity. And then just in terms of your question related to access, not all the reserves are open yet. In the presentation, we've closed selected reserves up until the 30th of June. And that's to ensure that when we open these reserves, that we have safe passage of access to our guests and visitors. We've done high-level assessments with a team of V3 on the roads. On selected reserves, our teams have been able to go out to the reserve and access and assess hiking trails. That we haven't concluded yet, and it's an ongoing process with the different managers. But we are monitoring those on a daily and weekly basis, and where it's safe to access and for our guests to enjoy the facilities, we do open that as a matter of urgency to limit the amount of damage to the loss of revenue. And then your question was, can we pin down where the greatest areas of concern are in terms of the floods? And currently we're looking at the Garden Route, the Karoo, parts of the West Coast and the central landscape within the Cape Winelands district that has experienced the worst of the flood damage so far. Thanks, Chair.
Colleagues, do we have any follow-up questions or any questions online? I see Member Marez raised his hand. So, oh, sorry, was there another?
Sorry, Chair, just to answer the honourable members on the jobs. Just to give an example, in Cedarburg, we employ staff from the local forestry village, and since the floods, we haven't had clients in any of our accommodation, and the people that we do employ there, we employ them for washing, ironing, maintaining the bed linen, and cleaning, that type of thing. So in that respect, there is an impact on jobs. But what we're trying to do is somehow get work to them. So what we've done from our side is a lot of our fire suits that need to be laundered for our next teams that are coming in for the following fire season. They will all be sent to Cedarburg and they can be washed and laundered there. So it's at least some sort of income for those people that are working there on the reserves. But that's an isolated incident. But I think it is happening wherever there's accommodation on the reserve. It needs to be cleaned and so on. And if that reserve is closed, then it does impact on those SMMEs, not necessarily our EPWP participants, because they get paid a salary and they'll be doing other work like repairing roads and things like that. Oh, and then the other question about whether we looked broader at notifications. So we've got an internal, sorry, not an internal, it's the external newsletter that goes out to all of our clients. So it's on there, and then it's also on the website as well. We make it very clear that people need to contact the reserves to make sure that the reserves are open. So I think we are getting that information out there as much as we can. I don't know if Shiraz, if you want to maybe add to that.
Then obviously we're very, very active on the social media stuff, Instagram, Facebook. So we'll constantly be sending updates and messages through those channels, informing visitors and potential clients what the status is, which reserves are closed, which reserves are open. We've been running an annual winter campaign for the past 20 years, and that's just got wiped out. So we are trying to redirect cancellations to where we do have availability. That is challenging.
Thanks. I'm going to take Member Murray first because he hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet, and then we will take the follow-ups from Member Stoffel and Member Masipa. Member Murray?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I hope my connection is much better at this moment.
Yes, perfect.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to know, there's a saying that, I don't know if the saying has been tested, but it says that for every R1 or dollar spent in resilient infrastructure, we could save 7 times or $7 or 7 rands for each rand or dollar in disaster response and recovery costs. So I just want to know, in terms of infrastructure that was damaged again, the reoccurring damage of infrastructure. So it was infrastructure that was repaired before, like bridges on the reserves, but then again got damaged too. Does Cape Nature have a list of those bridges that were damaged again? Because obviously we're spending, money's being spent on rebuilding, replacing, but not necessarily ensuring the resilience of the infrastructure. I wondered if that would be available to us. The other questions regarding revenue, I think that was answered, and I will leave it here. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Thanks very much. Member Stoffel?
Thank you, Chairperson. In terms of the fishery community, we've got most these freshwater angel clubs at these rivers. How do you deal with that? Because remember, those people, their livelihood is depending on that rivers where they catch those fishes. And if you look into the situation now, it doesn't allow them to go nowhere. They can't go nearer to the rivers because of these floods. So where do you categorize those people within your scope? Will they then depend on the municipalities with their support system? Or is there any support system from your side, from Cape Nature? And then the second question is that in terms of your scope, sometimes it happened that it falls in a municipal area. So in terms of the damage, do you manage it in a sharing way, or how do you deal with that? Thanks, Chair.
Member Masipa?
Thank you, Chair. Mine is just a really quick follow-up, Chair. Yeah, I think the question, why I'm asking that question with regards to, in terms of your advertisement message out there to say that, you know, things are good, you can really use the roads or you can come to this park and so forth. Because the pictures here, maybe just to start by saying that, you know, Parliament platform is also an opportunity really to use it to tell your story, you know, not only the bad story, because the pictures here are very bad. It means that if I was to book today, and if I'm listening, I'm watching online, and I'm having this presentation, I'll not book today because, I mean, the pictures are saying really that, you know, the place is damaged. So I just thought that I will make this point that the Parliament is also a platform of really sharing the story. But, you know, here the story is a very bad story. In fact, it's really, it's not looking good. It doesn't show that, you know, there's been some progress, you know, there are areas you can visit and so forth. So my call was that, Chair, if they could have really presented us this, what happened and what is the situation now, you know, because the situation now here is not depicted. I will not be booking. So maybe, you know, Chair, we need to bring them back again to come and share what is really the real story, you know, where I need to book now to go to a facility. Thank you, Chair.
I think from a safety perspective, Member Masipa, we wouldn't want you to put yourself in any danger. So, Mr. Ismail, you and your team?
Thanks, Chair. I think the Build Back Better methodology is starting to work for us. I think it's something we've adopted internally about a year or two ago. And we can certainly make a list available of some of the interventions that Dion has also raised. We can make a list available to the committee of those Build Back Better interventions, especially around the bridges, like Member Marais has raised. So we can definitely make that list available. The shared damage around municipalities and Cape Nature. I think for now, Cape Nature's mandate is purely around spending money on our reserves and protecting the reserve infrastructure. But I think there's a lot of in-kind responsibilities that we share with municipalities, like the 8 Cape Pass, for example. We will send teams and resources available together with the community to patch that road and make it workable, because, you know, we're part of the greater community. We don't see ourselves as different. That happens in a lot of incidences where there's fires, disasters. That is a culture that we've created within Cape Nature, that we need to support local communities. We need to support our sister municipalities and other government departments. So we're really not shy to move away from that. We also get involved in humanitarian assistance, where we get food parcels, blankets, clothing to communities, utilizing our own vehicles, our own resources, and those type of interventions. So where we can assist, we definitely do assist. Yeah. And vice versa, there are municipalities that also come to the party to assist Cape Nature. Okay. I'm not quite sure the angling club, that is freshwater. Dion, maybe from your side?
Just on
Sorry, I think you might be referring to fly fishing. Is that right? Was it angling?
No, it's
freshwater fishing.
It's
just
freshwater
general
fishing and
Freshwater angling.
yeah.
Okay.
And it's restricted to recreational use and not for commercial purposes. And on the reserves where we do allow the fishermen to access for recreational purposes, those reserves are closed, like the Mont and the bridge that was impacted. And also in certain reserves, these recreational fishers cannot get to the sites because it's not safe. So when those activities are safe, we will certainly allow it. We have activated our contractor for the Mont Bridge, for example. Our engineers have tested, they've gone back to the drawing board. So as the reserves come open, and maybe it's not only restricted to recreational fisheries, but all recreations across the board, like the Keerbooms River, where we have the only canoe trail in the province. Currently, it's not safe. The river is too high. We have variables. We don't know what has happened upstream and how it's affected our facilities, both from a recreational point of view, but also the overnight, complementary overnight accommodation facilities on these canoe trails and hiking trails and so forth. So once these activities are safe and we've signed it off on a ED level from a conservation operations perspective, we'll start opening reserves. We have those pressures around our revenue generation, and we have to find a balancing act between safe access and also maintain our resilience from a revenue generation perspective. Thanks, Member.
Yes, just on Honourable Marais' question about the assessment of the damage on damage. The assessment form that we are using does specifically have a column for that, saying, is this damage on repairs that were done after the 23-24? So we do have that information.
Just to clarify as well, in some cases, the construction works were still ongoing. So it wasn't that it was a completed solution that then got damaged. It was actually still work in progress. So just because that's not necessarily always clear.
Okay, now thank you. Just again on the point of the disasters catching up with us going forward. So we are considering, where our roads are, where our linear infrastructure is currently at, to look at whether if a road is not needed, that you close that road. But the issue with closing a road also, you have to maintain it. So you still have to spend money on that specific area that you're rehabilitating. But we are looking at that. So if, for instance, a specific road is mostly used for management purposes, and you have to say go out at the top of the mountain somewhere to sort of go and monitor rain gauge or something like that, or perhaps we can move that specific rain gauge to elsewhere. We've also found that some of our roads, because they were closed, so the reserve was then closed off from a management point of view, from a tourism point of view. As a result, then we need to look at what are alternatives, and as far as that is concerned. So as part of this process, we need to really direct some of our roads, just in terms of the build better aspect of things. So even though we suffered damages with some of the work that's recently been done, what we found is that most of the work, though, it's not everything is sort of washed away in terms of the recent infrastructure improvements that we made. In fact, because we've built better, we have found that some of that infrastructure was able to withstand some of the flooding with damages. So there is an ongoing exercise where we're looking at how we moving forward, where we do invest the state's resources, and will that process then will also inform our work with the Department of Environmental, so as the development of our infrastructure as well. So thank you.
Colleagues, I don't see any other further questions except one from Member Stoffel who's got a follow-up. So Member Stoffel, you can just have your follow-up then. Sorry, Member, can you just put your mic on?
Every time there's a disaster, you will see, sometimes we don't have control of nature. But in the eye of the ordinary people, they take as if there's certain areas being prioritized based on this reassessing of things. For each and every disaster, Cederberg will be the one. No, we have to be honest, and our people is looking at this to say, but every disaster That area has been prioritized. In terms of the projects that is there, each and every disaster should learn us a lesson. And you ask yourself, with the lot of maintenance within that roads, at the end of the day, it goes to the question that the quality of the work done at the projects. It goes to that questions, and it's questions that you can't ignore. Now, as this Cape Nature, can we then say with confidence that quality of work being done there? And what is this that you think that can maybe assist the Department of Infrastructure with the coming disasters that we are still facing, that can assist those roads? Because we have to work towards something. Each and every disaster can't just take the whole road, every time the whole road. Then there's something that we need to look into when we deal with these projects. Can you maybe then highlight to the committee, is there maybe that you think that we should, that you and the Department of Infrastructure have looked into with the engineers and come up with a workable thing for the future disasters? Thanks.
Thanks, Member Stoffel. All right, Mr. Ismail, I'm going to ask you and your team if you can just briefly answer that question and wrap up. So we've only got 15 minutes left, so we can then move on to our last item after that. So over to you.
To answer the question on the Cederberg, Honourable Member, it has also dawned on us and our role players that the Cederberg, the same areas get washed away every time. What we have done in anticipation of that, and with our future planning and the work that we've been doing with V3, we've now concluded, for 8 months now, a full-on flood study on both the Bos Herberge and the Cederberg campsite, including the public roads. So we are able to determine where water comes from and where it goes. So there is a redesign process underway. Part of that is included in the maintenance management plan, and in some of it, we have to do basic assessment reports. That goes to the National Department of for approval. In addition to that, our engineers are also working with the DOI engineers as well as the district roads engineers to look at the redesign of Uitkyk Pass, but also what are the mitigation measures they need to put in place to ensure that roads don't wash away, to ensure that we don't have a large impact on our tourism infrastructure. So that's an ongoing process that we are concluding now. In terms of Build Back Better, both from a provincial and district road perspective, but also at Cape Nature. We are looking at the redesign of our own tourism facilities, one, in terms of how we reprioritize the access road, but also where we make sacrifices on the campsite, for example, because you will have the same campsites wash away. So we will reprioritize our own infrastructure and what the future plans is for that. We are sitting down towards the end of July with the landscape management team so that we are able to demonstrate both from a resilience perspective, but also continue to generate the income that we have done before. Yeah, that's it.
Honourable Chair, if I may just add as well, the assessments that are being done at the moment and that were done last year and the year before are done with ourselves, DOI, the district municipalities and Provincial Disaster Management. So it's not only one party making a decision on what's a priority and what isn't. So it's that core group of people that are looking at it and prioritizing from that point of view. So the district municipality obviously has a higher priority for certain things than we do, but that does get sort of discussed and worked out at these site meetings and afterwards.
So coming in from the disaster centre side, as a department as well, obviously we sit on the jock with the teams. Often it's an economic decision. So for particular roads and bridges, they form, in some cases, like the Cedarburg Bridge, one of very few links, but it is linking to a massive citrus growing area. And that citrus goes straight to the port and gets shipped out for a huge amount, proportion of our GDP. So in some cases, the way in which the roads are prioritized on economic prioritization, and in other cases, it's specifically because people have been cut off and communities need access. So there's almost a triaging system in terms of that. And one of the difficult things we need to do is you can engineer anything. So yes, you can build something to withstand a 1 in 500 year event. The problem is that's very expensive. So as we saw with the Ashton Bridge, it was correctly scoped and built for the kind of flood that it was supposed to withstand, but it was very expensive. So where do we spend the money and where do we allow bridges to actively wash away? Rather, let them break earlier and do less damage than trying to build something that's halfway between a bridge that'll give way and a bridge that'll stand forever. So I think there are a lot of dynamics in building what kind of resilience to what kind of level event, and how does that balance with the cost? So yes, I think it's a bit frustrating for the ordinary people because they look at it and go, but it's washed away again. And in some cases, it's very, very old infrastructure as well, some of our mountain passes. So it's lasted well, but now it's no longer up to what we're having to withstand. So yes, I think there's some very serious adaptation questions that we have moving forward. I think the reality is that we cannot, as a country, we are not able to afford the disasters that we're having. We lose infrastructure each time, and we're not building back everything. So it's a massive issue for us overall as a country, and we do need to look very seriously at how we plan in advance and to what degree are we willing to safeguard which pieces, what things do we prioritize and why?
And I think just lastly from our side, I think with the floods of 2 years ago, Cape Nature made the decision to close the Algeria campsite, which is one of our most popular campsites throughout the year. It's popular for camping, but also people come there hiking and all those experiences. And I think it was a good decision to make because given the recent floods, imagine we've reinvested rebuilding those campsites. They would have been gone based on the most recent floods we experienced over the last 2 months. But I agree with Member Stoffel. It gives us good information now to how we plan and build back better and not to repeat those mistakes from putting the campsites where they are. So I think we've got a good planning team now, and I think the vision is there now not to repeat those mistakes, because I think we are very mindful at the end of the day. We are working with taxpayers' money. And we need to be very, very strategic on where we place these things. And we need to take climate change and mitigation and resilience into consideration for all our developments going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ishmael. I mean, just in closing from my side, I was part of the committee at the National Assembly when we were drafting the climate change, was then the climate change bill, which became the Climate Change Act. And one of the key aspects that was part of that was something that we inserted at the time as committee members around ensuring that there was a finance mechanism in place to provide for adaptation and mitigation in response to climate change. And maybe it's time for us to ask the question of national government again to say, how far along are we with this? It can't just be a case of responding to disasters. Where is the proactive funding that's coming down? I see Ms. Shippey is itching to answer this one. Ms. Shippey?
I was actually going to be very opportunistic and say that we would like to pose the question as a department where the funds are going from the various environmental taxes and fines. I know they're going to the general fiscus under the PFMA, but perhaps some of that money needs to be channeled specifically to the adaptation efforts. because I think at the moment it's distributed throughout the system, and it means that organizations like Cape Nature, who are trying to clear the catchments, etc., are not actually getting sufficient funding to do what they need to do to avoid the next disaster. So perhaps it is a question for debate.
Sure, and it's not just about our province, I suppose. It's all the provinces. We see what's happened with KZN and Eastern Cape, other provinces, and if we can help to push this, through the next loophole, then perhaps we can do a greater good for the country. So that's certainly something maybe Mr. Coetzee that we can put on the agenda for future discussion with the National Department. Thank you very much to you and your team, Mr. Ishmael and Ms. Shippey, for sticking around as well. Really appreciate that. All very valuable insights, and you are thus dismissed. And we'll just finish our last item. Thank you so much. Colleagues, the last item on the agenda is really our sort of action points and resolutions, but I think if we can first just have a look at the annual business plan, the draft which has been circulated. Obviously, we've had a number of meetings already that have taken place that are part and parcel of that. But what myself and Mr. Coetzee have been doing is going back to find out all of the requests for meetings and briefings that have come from members during our resolution segments. And we've managed to get all of the ones that were kind of top of the priority list and factor those in from all members. And we've included those going forward. Obviously, we have limited time and space with the matter of the 4th of November, obviously being one of those, but also our constituency periods and sittings and all of the other meetings we're in. So we're trying as best possible to fit as much in as we can. So, Mr. Coetzee, if you could maybe just take us through what we've allocated from the 26th, from the 22nd of June onwards. Obviously, we're only planning, as we've mentioned, officially up until August in terms of the agenda, because we don't know exactly how things are going to progress. But we have tentatively populated the rest of the agenda all the way up until November. So over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I don't know if it's quite visible, but I'll speak to it. Our next item that the committee is involved with will be from the 22nd of June till the 26th of June, which will be the cluster visit to the West Coast side. And then after that, we'll go into a constituency period, quite a lengthy constituency period. Chairperson, when we do then come back, we'll have on the 28th of July, it's a briefing by the Department of Environmental Affairs, Development Planning on the expanded public works program, on what they're doing on that. Let me just scroll down.
So yeah, this was a request. I actually think it was from Member Stoffels when we were talking with EPWP. So we put this one on. Yeah, if you can just talk to that quickly, Mr. Coetzee.
That will be on expanded public works program projects, including employee categorization and compensation criteria for allocation of funds to municipalities for that. So we'll schedule that for the 28th of July. Chairperson, then on the 18th of August, members will remember we had the briefing on the succulent poaching, and the resolution that came out there that we have a whole one-day session with all the stakeholders to talk about each role and how they can develop a plan on it. So we have identified the 18th of August. We will have the workshop or the dialogue session at Kirstenbosch Botanical Gardens, because that's also where they keep all the confiscated plants and all that. So members will have an opportunity to go see where they keep all of those plants as well. Then our next meeting or session will be... will be.
Sorry, it's a bit confusing because the one that's in yellow is tentative, and the reason for that is because Kirstenbosch were going to make sure that they could accommodate us for a site visit to see some of their special collections, and they were worried we might not all be able to fit. So Mr. Kutsia had just allocated that additional one, but the official one below, you can see there is the larger one. So the yellow one is just in case we can't all fit in for that one session.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Chairperson, then on the 1st of September, we'll do a site visit to Karweiderskraal landfill site. That was also flowing from a meeting we had on landfill sites. And then on the 15th of September, we will invite Environmental Affairs, Development Planning, Cape Nature, as well as the Department of Economic Development, Tourism, to brief in terms of to brief the committee on the value proportion of ecotourism for the empowerment of local indigenous communities for sustainable participation, heritage-based tourism. And that will coincide, and Chair, maybe the committee can guide us here. The other item for that day is also the briefing by local government, collaboration with the Department of Traditional Affairs, briefing on the committee on the criteria used for the recognition of traditional leaders. I know that was an issue that the committee raised. I think those two items might be just too much for one day.
Yeah. So I think what we'll do is we'll propose that to both sets of officials and just estimate how long those presentations might take. I think we'd have to do that session virtually anyway.
Okay.
So if they have a slot, yeah. But we'll see if we can fit it in. Otherwise, we might have to move one of them to a later stage. But those also were requests. I think the one was from Member Marais, the first one, and I think the second one as well. But we'll see if we can fit them into the same session. Otherwise, we'll divide those up.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Chairperson, then, just to point out to members that some of the items, we don't have specific dates next to it because the parliamentary program only runs up to the end of August. So we're not sure with upcoming local government elections where we're going to have meeting dates. But as soon as the program is available, we slot dates in there. Then the next item would be a site visit, and it will be a joint visit with the Standing Committee on the Premier. That will be the visit to the Hessequa, the phase 2 of the Hessequa Energy Resilience Project, as well as the Franshoek Water Facility. So that will be the one. And then I think later on in September, we will look at another.
Sorry, just on that one. So it's interrupted. That will be a sleepover, that one. We will require accommodation, so we'd stay over on the Tuesday.
That's correct, yeah.
Franshoek. So it's the Franshoek water facility. The date, we don't have the date officially yet.
The date, we'll leave on the Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then come back on the Wednesday.
But we just need to confirm, obviously, the program.
And then Chairperson, then later on in September, there will be a visit to the landfill site and also a project, a recycling project it's on the West Coast side, Vredendal, yeah. And then going into October, it will be a briefing by the Department of Local Government on the status of induction and training of new councillors. At the in view of the upcoming local government election, just to see their preparations to induct the new councillors after the elections. So we don't have a specific date for it yet, but as soon as the dates are available, then we go over into the annual report process. We'll have 2 meetings, one for local government and one for environmental affairs and Cape Nature, to discuss their their annual reports. Chairperson, then there's a few open slots that we can utilize, which then takes us to the adjustment appropriation. which take us to the end of the year. And then I'll have a look to see what the program looks like for the new year.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coetzee. In terms of those open slots at the end, there was one proposal that I'd like to make just before we open it up for other inputs. Member Masipa, this would pertain to you and your committee as well, which is for us to have a joint briefing on the Table Mountain National Park from a tourism and an environmental perspective, because Cape Nature is not directly involved in Table Mountain National Park. It's mainly governed by City of Cape Town and SANParks, but it falls squarely within the province. And I think it would be good for us to have that briefing. So, I mean, we can pencil it in. It's probably unlikely that we'll be able to have it in November anyway because of elections. But at least it's in the agenda and we can maybe plan for that going forward. Would you be comfortable with that as a chairperson? And members, I think it's a good one for us to possibly look at. Member Masipa?
I do support that. I think it's a good move that obviously, it provides services to tourism.
Yeah.
And this is our area. And I think it will be important to have that joint sitting.
All right. So, Mr. Goodson.
Just on a procedural point is that unfortunately our rules don't make provision for joint meetings. So maybe our committee can take the lead.
Yes, yeah,
but we do invite.
Correct. We'd invite the members of agriculture. Yes, yeah. I mean, there are some members who cross across anyway.
There's so many crossing.
Yeah. So then we'd invite the Department of Tourism to present. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I saw first up Member Van Wyk.
Chair, I notice here that we're not dealing with the APP, the annual performance plan at all. And that usually becomes an issue with the AG in terms of what we're doing. And then further, the quarterly financial reports or the performance reports of financial and non-financial matters also not being dealt with.
Oopsie, is that something, I mean, I know those normally come up as we go throughout the year.
Chair, that's quite correct. I actually made a note of it. And then when I looked at the amount of items that we had to be dealing with, I thought, okay, maybe those ones are not, but they are important. I think we do need to schedule the quarterly performance reports. The APP we normally deal with in the beginning with when they submit the budget. But I think it's maybe a good idea to call them in for that, yeah.
Okay, great. So in terms of forward planning, Mr. Coetzee, then let's just make sure we meet and pop that in. Okay, thanks, Member Van Wyk. It's a very good input. Yeah.
I think just to add to that, I think the problem that we have with APPs, it just seems as if this year the timing has not been fortuitous at all. I do notice that tomorrow, I think the Parliamentary Oversight Committee, I think, are dealing with the APP, and Finance is also dealing with APP. And I'm not aware of other committees that have dealt with them, and that if you just go through the months, it just seems to be fallen off. And I think if we go just move back in terms of the AG has always said that annual report has raised questions on whether the various committees have had a look at draft APP. So there's an expectation there as well. So this seems to be quite a difficult one on where we slot in, and I'm just mentioning it here, or Mr. Coetzee perhaps to take up at another forum in terms of when we actually get to slot these in.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think if you hit the nail on the head at the end, it might actually be a political discussion as well, because the difference between commenting on an APP that's already in place, effectively a presentation, as opposed to participating in the draft APP process, which I think would probably mean that we have more involvement in it, is two different questions. And I think that's a procedural issue that we need to take up. You know, is it a case of us just receiving a presentation on the APP, which, as they say, could have been an email, or is it a case of us actually participating in the process? And I think we would, as committee members, like to participate in the process. But how do we facilitate that?
Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Coetzee, do you have an input there?
No, you're absolutely right. I think there was a request or an attempt, I think a year ago, to get the committees to deal with the draft APPs. Timing is a bit of a problem, and I think we sort of now getting closer to the time where department starts drafting their APP. So this is almost, say, in 2 months' time. And unfortunately, I'm going to think it's going to fall again just very close to the local government elections. But I will follow it up and see if we can maybe work in our 2 departments and have a discussion with them on their draft. Even if the committee just provide them with ideas and some comments and things that they can consider then.
Okay.
But I'll have a look at the date.
Colleagues, apart from those inputs, are we happy with the timetable, the draft timetable, draft APP, draft annual business plan as it stands? Member Stoffel?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy. I just want to add that, you know, when we are involved with the APPs, or whether it's draft or whether, it makes it so easy for us when we start to even any discussion when it. So for me, it's important that we have. It will be ideal if we can manage such. I know the time frame doesn't allow, but it's always good to have such. Yeah. In terms of this program, it's a good program. But there's one landfill site that we want us to consider, and that's the one of Musenbeck.
Okay.
Because I know.
Just expand a bit there.
I know there was, I think, that landfill site or landfill building, it's about 3-something million. It's a lot of money spent there. And currently the status of it, it's a white elephant. Because I know there was a court case involved there. But for me, it's just to know what is the status of that. And even it's a very good landfill site because it got this machinery and all those kind of things that a landfill site is necessary for recycling and all those kind of things. So maybe it's necessary for us to go at some stage there also and to check and the status of that building.
Okay.
Thanks.
Musenberg one.
Yeah, I think it's the Musenberg recycling facility.
Yes.
Member Stopper, thank you for that. Okay, well then we had that other free slot, Mr. Coetzee, so let's put that there then as the tentative second. Okay, item. Right, so we filled our agenda. That's perfect. All right, colleagues, if we are happy with that, can I have someone to propose that we adopt that as it is, as a draft? Thank you. And then Member van Wyk. Obviously, colleagues, with the caveat that it will be almost certainly amended as we go, with dates added and that. But for now, that is our draft. And any changes we'll certainly bring back to the committee to let you know. Colleagues, are there any other resolutions or action points anybody wants to raise?
Yes,
Member
Chair.
Stoffel?
Yes, Chair. Chair, it's just maybe we should take it further in the Committee of Local Government. There is really a need to look into the disaster shelters. We need to take that up or have a proper discussion or have a proper planning to say, how are we going to, as a committee, how can we ensure through these disaster shelters that we don't infringe the rights of people? Because this thing, whether we like it or not, will put our municipalities in a very difficult or accountable way, because these shelters is not up to date. Now, what the municipalities is saying is to say, people must go and stay with families and this. Not everyone can accommodate your family.
Just to confirm, no interrupt you. So we're talking about disaster accommodation, not homeless shelters. We're talking about when there's a disaster
Where there's a disaster.
planning. Okay.
Because
Alright.
what they do, they put people in the community hall. See, where there's no separation of females or males. It's just they put people there. So we are saying, instead of saying to people, go to your family or go and stay there. So we as a committee, we must look into that. As how can we rescue this situation when it comes to disasters? Because we are still faced with disasters. Future. This is that I wanted to say. I'm not sure whether you have captured.
I'm good, Member Stoffel. Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
It might also just be something that touch on social development and not necessarily local government.
Yeah.
But I'll speak to Dr. Diner.
Yes.
And then I'll find
because
out.
obviously DRM communicates with social development
And
when these things happen.
If it's
Yeah.
social development, then we'll invite them to the meeting.
Look, there's also an aspect of local government involved in this, because a lot of the time it's city municipal facilities that are offered up as shelters, and as Member Stoffels correctly mentions, they're not always ideally suited to accommodating a lot of people. So yes, Member Masipa.
Yeah, I just want to touch on this one because we conducted an oversight, and I think this is a multidisciplinary, approach. It cannot really be left to one particular department because with that kind of relocation or whatever that we call it, there will be a need for services, schools, how do they access the school? How do they access clinics? All those kind of formation, the social development, coming and supporting with food and all those kind of structures. So I think it's more a multidisciplinary approach. And I think it will be ideally, in the JOG space more than in any specific department. And I do not know whose job. Is it Premier or is it the, yeah.
We'll follow up to establish that, yeah. Member Stoffel, I think last point, if you can,
Yes. Yes. And I think there's a necessity, Chair, for I'm not sure whether I can call it an ad hoc committee to specifically look into this disaster relief. Whether the municipalities is getting this relief. The reason why I'm saying that is that in some areas now, the political leadership use that relief for canvassing. If I can refer back with the COVID, you remember the COVID relief fund? It was being misused. It was being abused. And district might distribute things to the local municipalities. But does that things really get to the people who are supposed to get it? And this is what we are faced at these smaller municipalities and other municipalities. And as a committee, I'm just trying to look, how can we really make sure the actual beneficiaries is getting that? Because there was hampers being given as a relief packages to this to those people, but some of them never received it. I'm just mentioning it, but at some stage we have to look into that in detail.
Thanks. Those very good inputs. Thank you, Member Stoffel. I think we've got something now to chew over there, Mr. Kutse, at our next one-on-one. Yeah, see how we can plan that in. I see Member Murray and then Member Vessels have their hands up. Member Murray.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, just from my side, I'd like to just ask if we could ask I think it's Cape Nature that indicated that they do have a list available of the Build Back Better interventions, and that they will be able to provide the committee with that And I wondered whether we could include that in our resolutions, as that has a cost implication in terms of taxpayers' money being spent on rebuilding all the time, the same bridges that's on the nature reserves. So I wondered if we could have that, and then also the projects that are currently, like they mentioned, work in progress, if that could also be provided to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Maria. Mr. Katia has actually just assured me that he's got that down. So we'll definitely put that through as a request. Thank you. Member Vessels.
Thanks, Chair. I want to latch on to just what Member Stoffel said, and maybe this is an idea for the committee. I think we should facilitate something where local municipalities, so B municipalities, in other words, come and explain to the committee the relief that they offer. In other words, their disaster relief policies. So all B municipalities should have such a policy. Now that determines, stuff like the distribution of gun plus, the distribution of food packages, the distribution of, whatever the case may be. And what I usually find during these type of disasters is there doesn't seem to be any uniformity between municipalities in terms of the distribution in relief efforts. Now, and to add to what Member Stoffels is raising, now it starts getting political. Now it starts becoming a political minefield. So I really think that if there is anything that this committee can contribute, it is maybe to establish or to try and establish a uniformity within the disaster response policies of B municipalities to a large extent. My feeling is that but I think where one must start is to first understand what it is that each municipality does within their budget constraints. And I'm not talking about the district jocks or the provincial jock. I'm talking about the physical assistance that B municipalities is providing, and they usually provide it from their various social departments or whatever the case may be. But I really think that we should try and establish what it is that B municipalities, one, can afford, two, are currently doing, three, how quick their response is, because that is usually humanitarian of nature. And I think within that, we will see where there might be financial shortages or, come up with some other proposal where more assistance can be provided to B municipalities themselves, because there is a lot of provincial and support and district support towards the jock and that immediate recovery. I do think we can. It will be very interesting to understand what the municipalities has done, can done, and what their policies allows them to do.
Thank you, Member Vessels. Those very good inputs, and also thank you for putting on your camera. It's nice to be able to see your face while you're speaking. You're setting an example for other members. I know, Member Maria, you weren't present right at the beginning, but it would be nice for us to do this when we do have virtual sessions. It's much nicer to interact with the face than an avatar.
I'll make sure of that at our next sitting, Chair.
No, 100%. No worries. No worries at all. Okay. Have you captured all of that, Mr. Kutsia?
Chair, on a point of order, we must see Mr. Marea, otherwise we might be speaking to somebody else, not me.
Member Masipa is doubting that I'm present. There I am, sir.
There he is. There he is. Okay, Member Van Wyk.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I think I want to echo what Member Wessels has said, and it actually started with Member Stoffel in terms of the disaster type of situations that happen at local municipalities, and I think it goes along with a policy and the approach, and to what extent local municipalities in fact have a disaster plan. Because Member Stoffel was referring to, for instance, halls and having to house people there, and how one does that. Because I think what municipalities need to know, if it happens in area A, how are you going to deal with it there as opposed to area D, for instance, in terms of the facilities that are available and how that gets dealt with. I think Member Wessels has dealt almost with some of those other logistical issues as to, how does one deal with gun plus? How does one deal with, a number of the other areas of relief, whether it be food packages and so forth? I think it almost goes a little bit further into the extent of not only those aspects, but also just trying to just gather my thought here that I did have. I don't know, it slipped on mine for a moment now. Let me come back to that. Just give me a sec.
No, it's no problem. I think we've in the interim, we've got quite a lot of stuff. Member Van Wyk?
Sorry, yes, what we have seen through this disaster now is the pressure on municipalities in terms of the recovery exercise that needed to be undertaken. And what I was wanting to say are the extraordinary costs that municipalities would have needed to incur in some areas where there have been electricity outages that have stretched over more than a week in many cases. In terms of water, getting water supplies back. And I would imagine that those costs on municipalities would be fairly extraordinary and probably quite heavy in the case of certain municipalities. And, just thinking as to that maybe through the whole disaster process and in terms of their exercise that has been undertaken, I don't know whether municipalities, that cost that has been shown to us today, that's probably only infrastructure damage. It is not the cost of what they needed to undertake. For instance, with the massive the wind effect and the wind damage that's created to vegetation being one aspect, the electricity another, and to water, that maybe those aspects should also be gathered as to how that is going to be dealt with and what that impact is, and as part of disaster planning for each of those local municipalities. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, and I think a central point, maybe just to wrap up, is this whole theme around disaster relief should never be dependent on your political affiliations, ever. So if any of that is happening anywhere, it needs to be stamped out immediately. And even though we know certain municipalities are maybe in a slightly more difficult position than others, if relief is being provided, it needs to be allocated without fear or favor. All right, I think we've got a whole new briefing session there to plan for, Mr. Katsia. Thank you, colleagues. It has been, I think, oh, sorry, Member Marais, yes. And I see Member Wessels as well. So, sorry, can I just take Member Wessels first? Is just in terms of his number one, Member Wessels?
Of course. No, not a problem.
There he is.
Chair, the other thing that I also just wanted to mention, and I thought about it, within this devastating winds, and I'm not exactly sure where it fits. It obviously fits with you, but it's also very beneficial maybe to Member Masipa's committee, is the establishment of municipal composting facilities. Now, therein lies a serious economical benefit, firstly, but it also can create an extreme amount of jobs. And, I do not know the status of these composting facilities across the Western Cape. I don't know how many facilities, municipal facilities there are, and also the municipal composting facilities that there are. It would be very interesting to get some, from an environmental perspective, agriculture perspective, and job creation perspective. It would be very interesting to see, the benefits that those poses to a municipality. So that is just also something that I thought might be very interesting.
Yes, maybe we could put that onto the agenda with one of our visits to landfill sites, even if it involves us, hooking up a virtual meeting, a virtual briefing at that venue with officials. We can try and make a plan for that. I mean, I know municipally, I think the City of Cape Town's got a program where they provide free composting bins, which I think is a really cool project. So looking at some of those ideas and ways that we can minimize increased separation at source and how much waste goes to landfill. Now, that's a good proposal. And then Member Marais.
Mr. Chair, now I just wanted to concur with you and Honourable Stoffel on the humanitarian aid matter. I think that is a very important matter, especially in terms of the nature that we are, the season that we're in, when there's disaster relief. And I think it affects all of us across political lines, but we have to keep that particular humanitarian process apolitical and make sure that municipalities are handling it, managing it in that manner. And then, Mr. Chair, just in closing, this is my last point, sir. I know that the department mentioned, not the department, disaster center mentioned that they were assisting 2 municipalities with winter readiness programs. And I was just wondering whether that is something, that we perhaps need to expand, because disaster management center sits with all the expertise that is lacking at municipal level in terms of this level of planning, and whether that should be expanded to other municipalities as well that are especially disaster prone areas, informal settlements, etc., and so on.
Thanks. Yeah, can we include that? Yeah. Okay. Colleagues, I don't. Thanks, Member Marais. I don't see any further questions. Member Masipa is just showing his excitement for the meeting there. Thank you, colleagues. I think it's been a really interesting session. I think we've learned a lot and we've made some good ground. So thank you, and we'll see you all on Thursday, if not before. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it.